Chapter 7. Parents, Teachers, and Coaches, Where do mindsets come from? No parent thinks, I wonder what I can do today to undermine my children, subvert their effort, turn them off learning, and limit their achievement. Of course not. They think, I would do anything, give anything, to make my children successful. Yet, many of the things they do boomerang. Their helpful judgments, their lessons, their motivating techniques often send the wrong message. In fact, every word and action can send a message. It tells children or students, or athletes how to think about themselves. It can be a fixed mindset message that says, you have permanent traits and I'm judging them. Or it can be a growth mindset message that says, you are a developing person and I am committed to your development. It's remarkable how sensitive children are to these messages, and how concerned they are about them. Haim Ginott, the child-rearing sage of the 1950s through 70s, tells this story. Bruce, age 5, went with his mother to his new kindergarten. When they arrived, Bruce looked up at the paintings on the wall and said, "Who made those ugly pictures?" His mother rushed to correct him. It's not nice to call pictures ugly when they are so pretty. But his teacher knew exactly what he meant. And here, she said, you don't have to paint pretty pictures. You can paint mean pictures if you feel like it. Bruce gave her a big smile. She had answered his real question, what happens to a boy who doesn't paint well? Next, Bruce spotted a broken fire engine. He picked it up and asked in a self-righteous tone, who broke this fire engine? Again. His mother rushed in, what difference does it make to you who broke it? You don't know anyone here. But the teacher understood. Toys are for playing, she told him. Sometimes they get broken. It happens. Again, his question was answered, what happens to boys who break toys? Bruce waved to his mother and went off to start his first day of kindergarten. This was not a place where he would be judged and labeled. You know, we never outgrow our sensitivity to these messages. Several years ago, my husband and I spent 2 weeks in Provence, in the south of France. Everyone was wonderful to us, very kind and very generous. But on the last day, we drove to Italy for lunch. When we got there and found a little family restaurant, tears started streaming down my face. I felt so nurtured. I said to David, you know, in France, when they're nice to you, you feel like you've passed a test. But in Italy, there is no test. Parents and teachers who send fixed mindset messages are like France, and parents and teachers who send growth mindset messages are like Italy. Let's start with the messages parents send to their children. But, you know, they are also messages that teachers can send to their students or coaches can send to their athletes. Parents and teachers' messages about success and failure. Messages about success. Listen for the messages in the following examples. You learned that so quickly. You're so smart. Look at that drawing. Martha, is he the next Picasso or what? You're so brilliant, you got an A without even studying. If you're like most parents, you hear these as supportive, esteem-boosting messages. But listen more closely. See if you can hear another message. It's the one that children hear. If I don't learn something quickly, I'm not smart. I shouldn't try drawing anything hard or they'll see I'm no Picasso. I'd better quit studying or they won't think I'm brilliant. How do I know this? Remember chapter 3, how I was thinking about all the praise parents were lavishing on their kids in the hope of encouraging confidence and achievement? You're so smart. You're so talented. You're such a natural athlete. And I thought, wait a minute. Isn't it the kids with the fixed mindset? The vulnerable kids who are obsessed with this? Wouldn't harping on intelligence or talent make all kids even more obsessed with it? That's why we set out to study this. After 7 experiments with hundreds of children, we had some of the clearest findings I've ever seen. Praising children's intelligence harms their motivation and it harms their performance. How can that be? Don't children love to be praised? Yes, children love praise. And they especially love to be praised for their intelligence and talent. It really does give them a boost, a special glow, but only for the moment. The minute they hit a snag, their confidence goes out the window and their motivation hits rock bottom. If success means they're smart, then failure means they're dumb. That's the fixed mindset. Here is the voice of a mother who saw the effects of well-meant praise for intelligence. I want to share my real-life experience with you. I am the mother of a very intelligent 5th grader. He consistently scores in the 99th percentile on standardized school tests in math, language, and science, but he has had some very real self-worth problems. My husband, who is also an intelligent person, felt his parents never valued intellect, and he has overcompensated with our son in attempting to praise him for being smart. Over the past years, I have suspected this was causing a problem, because my son, while he easily excels in school, is reluctant to take on more difficult work or projects, just as your studies show, because then he would think he's not smart. He projects an overinflated view of his abilities and claims he can perform better than others, both intellectually and in physical activities, but will not attempt such activities, because, of course, in his failure he would be shattered. And here is the voice of one of my Columbia students reflecting on his history. I remember often being praised for my intelligence rather than my efforts, and slowly but surely I developed an aversion to difficult challenges. Most surprisingly, this extended beyond academic and even athletic challenges to emotional challenges. This was my greatest learning disability, this tendency to see performance as a reflection of character and, if I could not accomplish something right away, to avoid that task or treat it with contempt. I know, it feels almost impossible to resist this kind of praise. We want our loved ones to know that we prize them and appreciate their successes. Even I have fallen into the trap. One day I came home and my husband, David, had solved a very difficult problem we had been puzzling over for a while. Before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "You're brilliant." Needless to say, I was appalled at what I had done, and as the look of horror spread over my face, he rushed to reassure me. "I know you meant it in the most growth-minded way." That I searched for strategies, kept at it, tried all kinds of solutions, and finally mastered it. "Yes," I said, smiling sweetly, "that's exactly what I meant." Parents think they can hand children permanent confidence, like a gift, by praising their brains and talent. It doesn't work, and, in fact, has the opposite effect. It makes children doubt themselves as soon as anything is hard or anything goes wrong. If parents want to give their children a gift, the best thing they can do is to teach their children to love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort, seek new strategies, and keep on learning. That way, their children don't have to be slaves of praise. They will have a lifelong way to build and repair their own confidence, sending messages about process and growth. So what's the alternative to praising talent or intelligence? David's reassurance gives us a hint. One of my students tells us more. "I went home this weekend to find my 12-year-old sister ecstatic about school. I asked what she was so excited about, and she said, 'I got 102 on my social studies test.' I heard her repeat this phrase about 5 more times that weekend. At that point I decided to apply what we learned in class to this real-life situation. Rather than praising her intelligence or her grade, I asked questions that made her reflect on the effort she put into studying and on how she has improved from the year before. Last year, her grades dropped lower and lower as the year progressed, so I thought it was important for me to intervene and steer her in the right direction at the beginning of this year. Does this mean we can't praise our children enthusiastically when they do something great? Should we try to restrain our admiration for their successes? Not at all. It just means that we should keep away from a certain kind of praise that judges their intelligence or talent, or praise that implies that we're proud of them for their intelligence or talent rather than for the work they put in. We can appreciate them as much as we want for the growth-oriented process, what they accomplished through practice, study, persistence, and good strategies. And we can ask them about their work in a way that recognizes and shows interest in their efforts and choices. You really studied for your test and your improvement shows it. You read the material over several times, you outlined it, and you tested yourself on it. It really worked. I like the way you tried all kinds of strategies on that math problem until you finally got it. You thought of a lot of different ways to do it and found the one that worked. I like that you took on that challenging project for your science class. It will take a lot of work doing the research, designing the apparatus, buying the parts, and building it. Boy, you're going to learn a lot of great things. I know school used to be easy for you and you used to feel like the smart kid all the time. But the truth is that you weren't using your brain to the fullest. I'm really excited about how you're stretching yourself now and working to learn hard things. That homework was so long and involved. I really admire the way you concentrated and finished it. That picture has so many beautiful colors. Tell me about them. You put so much thought into this essay. It really makes me understand Shakespeare in a new way. The passion you put into that piano piece gives me a real feeling of joy. How do you feel when you play it? What about a student who worked hard and didn't do well? I liked the effort you put in, but let's work together some more and figure out what it is you don't understand. We all have different learning curves. It may take more time for you to catch on to this and be comfortable with this material, but if you keep at it like this you will. Everyone learns in a different way. Let's keep trying to find the way that works for you. This may be especially important for children with learning disabilities. Often for them it is not sheer effort that works but finding the right strategy. I was excited to learn recently that Haim Ginott, through his lifelong work with children, came to the same conclusion. Praise should deal, not with the child's personality attributes, but with his efforts and achievements. Sometimes people are careful to use growth-oriented praise with their children but then ruin it by the way they talk about others. I have heard parents say in front of their children, he's just a born loser, she's a natural genius, or she's a pea-brain. When children hear their parents level fixed judgments at others, it communicates a fixed mindset. And they have to wonder, am I next? This caveat applies to teachers, too. In one study, we taught students a math lesson spiced up with some math history, namely, stories about great mathematicians. For half of the students, we talked about the mathematicians as geniuses who easily came up with their math discoveries. This alone propelled students into a fixed mindset. It sent the message, there are some people who are born smart in math and everything is easy for them. Then there are the rest of you. For the other half of the students, we talked about the mathematicians as people who became passionate about math and ended up making great discoveries. This brought students into a growth mindset. The message was, skills and achievement come through commitment and effort. It's amazing how kids sniff out these messages from our innocent remarks. One more thing about praise. When we say to children, wow, you did that so quickly, or look, you didn't make any mistakes. What message are we sending? We are telling them that what we prize are speed and perfection. Speed and perfection are the enemy of difficult learning. If you think I'm smart when I'm fast and perfect, I'd better not take on anything challenging. So what should we say when children complete a task, say, math problems, quickly and perfectly? Should we deny them the praise they have earned? Yes. When this happens, I say, whoops. I guess that was too easy. I apologize for wasting your time. Let's do something you can really learn from. Reassuring children. How do you make a child feel secure before a test or performance? The same principle applies. Reassuring children about their intelligence or talent backfires. They'll only be more afraid to show a deficiency. Christina was a really bright high school student who, much to her shame, did terribly on tests. She always studied, she always knew the material, but every time it came to the test, she got so wound up that her mind went blank. Her grades suffered. She disappointed her teachers. She let her parents down. And it was only going to get worse as she faced the college board tests that the schools she longed to attend prized so highly. The night before each test, her parents, seeing how distraught she was, tried to build her confidence. Look, you know how smart you are and we know how smart you are. You've got this nailed. Now, stop worrying. They were as supportive as they knew how to be, but they were raising the stakes even higher. What could they have said instead? It must be a terrible thing to feel that everyone is evaluating you and you can't show what you know. We want you to know that we are not evaluating you. We care about your learning, and we know that you've learned your stuff. We're proud that you've stuck to it and kept learning. Messages about failure. Praising success should be the least of our problems, right? Failure seems like a much more delicate matter. Children may already feel discouraged and vulnerable. Let's tune in again, this time to the messages parents can send in times of failure. 9-year-old Elizabeth was on her way to her first gymnastics meet. Lanky, flexible, and energetic, she was just right for gymnastics, and she loved it. Of course, she was a little nervous about competing, but she was good at gymnastics and felt confident of doing well. She had even thought about the perfect place in her room to hang the ribbon she would win. In the first event, the floor exercises, Elizabeth went first. Although she did a nice job, the scoring changed after the first few girls and she lost. Elizabeth also did well in the other events, but not well enough to win. By the end of the evening, she had received no ribbons and was devastated. What would you do if you were Elizabeth's parents? 1. Tell Elizabeth you thought she was the best. 2. Tell her she was robbed of a ribbon that was rightfully hers. 3. Reassure her that gymnastics is not that important. 4. Tell her she has the ability and will surely win next time. 5. Tell her she didn't deserve to win. There is a strong message in our society about how to boost children's self-esteem, and a main part of that message is, protect them from failure. While this may help with the immediate problem of a child's disappointment, it can be harmful in the long run. Why? Let's look at the 5 possible reactions from a mindset point of view and listen to the messages. The first, you thought she was the best, is basically insincere. She was not the best, you know it, and she does, too. This offers her no recipe for how to recover or how to improve. The second, she was robbed, places blame on others, when in fact the problem was mostly with her performance, not the judges. Do you want her to grow up blaming others for her deficiencies? The third, reassure her that gymnastics doesn't really matter. Teaches her to devalue something if she doesn't do well in it right away. Is this really the message you want to send? The fourth, she has the ability, may be the most dangerous message of all. Does ability automatically take you where you want to go? If Elizabeth didn't win this meet, why should she win the next one? The last option, tell her she didn't deserve to win, seems hard-hearted under the circumstances. And of course you wouldn't say it quite that way. But that's pretty much what her growth-minded father told her. Here's what he actually said, Elizabeth, I know how you feel. It's so disappointing to have your hopes up and to perform your best but not to win. But you know, you haven't really earned it yet. There were many girls there who've been in gymnastics longer than you and who've worked a lot harder than you. If this is something you really want, then it's something you'll really have to work for. He also let Elizabeth know that if she wanted to do gymnastics purely for fun, that was just fine. But if she wanted to excel in the competitions, more was required. Elizabeth took this to heart, spending much more time repeating and perfecting her routines, especially the ones she was weakest in. At the next meet, there were 80 girls from all over the region. Elizabeth won 5 ribbons for the individual events and was the overall champion of the competition, hauling home a giant trophy. By now, her room is so covered with awards, you can hardly see the walls. In essence, her father not only told her the truth, but also taught her how to learn from her failures and do what it takes to succeed in the future. He sympathized deeply with her disappointment. But he did not give her a phony boost that would only lead to further disappointment. I've met with many coaches and they ask me, what happened? To the coachable athletes? Where did they go? Many of the coaches lament that when they give their athletes corrective feedback, the athletes grumble that their confidence is being undermined. Sometimes the athletes phone home and complain to their parents. They seem to want coaches who will simply tell them how talented they are and leave it at that. The coaches say that in the old days, after a little league game or a kiddie soccer game, parents used to review and analyze the game on the way home and give helpful process tips. Now on the ride home, they say, parents heap blame on the coaches and referees for the child's poor performance or the team's loss. They don't want to harm the child's confidence by putting the blame on the child. But as in the example of Elizabeth above, children need honest and constructive feedback. If children are protected from it, they won't learn well. They will experience advice, coaching, and feedback as negative and undermining. Withholding constructive criticism does not help children's confidence, it harms their future. Constructive criticism, more about failure messages. We always hear the term constructive criticism. But doesn't everyone think the criticism they give their children is constructive? Why would they give it if they didn't think it was helpful? Yet a lot if it is not helpful at all. It's full of judgment about the child. Constructive means helping the child to fix something, build a better product, or do a better job. Billy rushed through his homework, skipping several questions and answering the others in a short, sloppy way. His father hit the roof. This is your homework. Can't you ever get it right? You are either dense or irresponsible. Which is it? The feedback managed to question his son's intelligence and character at the same time, and to imply that the defects were permanent. How could the dad have expressed his frustration and disappointment without assassinating his son's attributes? Here are some ways. Son, it really makes me upset when you don't do a full job. When do you think you can complete this? Son, is there something you didn't understand in the assignment? Would you like me to go over it with you? Son, I feel sad when I see you missing a chance to learn. Can you think of a way to do this that would help you learn more? Son, this looks like a really boring assignment. You have my sympathy. Can you think of a way to make it more interesting, or let's try to think of a way to lessen the pain and still do a good job. Do you have any ideas? Son, remember I told you how tedious things help us learn to concentrate? This one is a real challenge. This will really take all your concentration skills. Let's see if you can concentrate through this whole assignment. Sometimes children will judge and label themselves. Janot tells of Philip, age 14, who was working on a project with his father and accidentally spilled nails all over the floor. He guiltily looked at his dad and said, Philip, gee, I'm so clumsy. Father, that's not what we say when nails spill. Philip, what do you say? Father, you say, the nails spilled, I'll pick them up. Philip, just like that? Father, just like that. Philip, thanks, Dad. Children learn the messages. Kids with the fixed mindset tell us they get constant messages of judgment from their parents. They say they feel as though their traits are being measured all the time. We asked them, suppose your parents offered to help you with your schoolwork. Why would they do this? They said, the real reason is that they wanted to see how smart I was at the schoolwork I was working on. We asked, suppose your parents are happy that you got a good grade. Why would that be? They said, they were happy to see I was a smart kid. We asked, suppose your parents discussed your performance with you when you did poorly on something in school. Why would they do this? They said, they might have been worried I wasn't one of the bright kids, and they think bad grades might mean I'm not smart. So every time something happens, these children hear a message of judgment. Maybe all kids think their parents are judging them. Isn't that what parents do, nag and judge? That's not what students with the growth mindset think. They think their parents are just trying to encourage learning and good study habits. Here's what they say about their parents' motives. Q. Suppose your parents offer to help you with your school work. Why would they do this? A. They wanted to make sure I learned as much as I could from my schoolwork. Q. Suppose your parents are happy that you got a good grade. A. They're happy because a good grade means that I really stuck to my work. Q. Suppose your parents discussed your performance with you when you did poorly on something in school. A. They wanted to teach me ways to study better in the future. Even when it was about their conduct or their relationships, the kids with the fixed mindset felt judged, but the kids with the growth mindset felt helped. Q. Imagine that your parents became upset when you didn't do what they asked you to do. Why would they be this way? Fixed mindset child, they were worried I might be a bad kid. Growth mindset child, they wanted to help me learn ways of doing it better next time. All kids misbehave. Research shows that normal young children misbehave every 3 minutes. Does it become an occasion for judgment of their character or an occasion for teaching? Q. Imagine that your parents were unhappy when you didn't share with other kids. Why would they be this way? Fixed mindset child, they thought it showed them what kind of person I was. Growth mindset child, they wanted to help me learn better skills for getting along with other kids. Children learn these lessons early. Children as young as toddlers pick up these messages from their parents, learning that their mistakes are worthy of judgment and punishment. Or learning that their mistakes are an occasion for suggestions and teaching. Here's a kindergarten boy we will never forget. You will hear him role-playing different messages from his two parents. This is the situation. He wrote some numbers in school, they contained an error, and now he tells us how his parents would react. Mother, hello. What are you sad about? Boy, I gave my teacher some numbers and I skipped the number 8 and now I'm feeling sad. Mother, well, there's one thing that can cheer you up. Boy, what? Mother, if you really tell your teacher that you tried your best, she wouldn't be mad at you. Turning to father, we're not mad. Are we? Father, oh, yes we are. Son, you better go right to your room. I wish I could tell you he listened to his mother's growth-oriented message. But in our study, he seemed to heed the judgmental message of his dad, downgrading himself for his errors and having no good plan for fixing them. Yet at least he had his mother's effort message that he could, hopefully, put to use in the future. Parents start interpreting and reacting to their child's behavior. At minute 1. A new mother tries to nurse her baby. The baby cries and won't nurse. Or takes a few sucks, gives up, and starts screaming. Is the baby stubborn? Is the baby deficient? After all, isn't nursing an inborn reflex? Aren't babies supposed to be naturals at nursing? What's wrong with my baby? A new mother in this situation told me. At first I got really frustrated. Then I kept your work in mind. I kept saying to my baby, we're both learning how to do this. I know you're hungry. I know it's frustrating, but we're learning. This way of thinking helped me stay cool and guide her through till it worked. It also helped me understand my baby better, so I knew how to teach her other things, too. Don't judge. Teach. It's a learning process. Children pass on the messages. Another way we know that children learn these messages is that we can see how they pass them on. Even young children are ready to pass on the wisdom they've learned. We asked 2nd grade children, what advice would you give to a child in your class who was having trouble in math? Here's the advice from a child with the growth mindset. Do you quit a lot? Do you think for a minute and then stop? If you do, you should think for a long time too. Minutes maybe, and if you can't get it you should read the problem again. If you can't get it then, you should raise your hand and ask the teacher. Isn't that the greatest? The advice from children with the fixed mindset was not nearly as useful. Since there's no recipe for success in the fixed mindset, their advice tended to be short and sweet. I'm sorry was the advice of one child as he offered his condolences. Even babies can pass along the messages they've received. Mary Main and Carol George studied abused children, who had been judged and punished by their parents for crying or making a fuss. Abusive parents often don't understand that children's crying is a signal of their needs, or that babies can't stop crying on command. Instead, they judge the child as disobedient, willful, or bad for crying. Maine and George watched the abused children, who were 1 to 3 years old, in their daycare setting, observing how they reacted when other children were in distress and crying. The abused children often became angry at the distressed children, and some even tried to assault them. They had gotten the message that children who cry are to be judged and punished. We often think that the legacy of abuse gets passed on to others only when the victims of abuse become parents. But this amazing study shows that children learn lessons early and they act on them. How did Nonabust children react to their distressed classmate? By the way, they showed sympathy. Many went over to the crying child to see what was wrong and to see if they could help out. Isn't discipline teaching? Many parents think that when they judge and punish, they are teaching, as in, I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget. What are they teaching? They are teaching their children that if they go against the parents' rules or values, they'll be judged and punished. They're not teaching their children how to think through the issues and come to ethical, mature decisions on their own. And chances are, they're not teaching their children that the channels of communication are open. 16-year-old Alyssa came to her mother and said that she and her friends wanted to try alcohol. Could she invite them over for a cocktail party? On the face of it, this might seem outrageous. But here's what Alyssa meant. She and her friends had been going to parties where alcohol was available, but they didn't want to try it in a setting where they didn't feel safe and in control. They also didn't want to drive home after drinking. They wanted to try it in a supervised setting, with their parents' permission, where their parents could come and pick them up afterward. It doesn't matter whether Alyssa's parents said yes or no. They had a full discussion of the issues involved. They had a far more instructive discussion than what would have followed from an outraged, angry, and judgmental dismissal. It's not that growth-minded parents indulge and coddle their children. Not at all. They set high standards, but they teach the children how to reach them. They say no, but it's a fair, thoughtful, and respectful no. Next time you're in a position to discipline, ask yourself, what is the message I'm sending here? I will judge and punish you, or I will help you think and learn. Mindsets can be a life and death matter. Of course, parents want the best for their children, but sometimes parents put their children in danger. As the director of undergraduate studies for my department at Columbia, I saw a lot of students in trouble. Here is the story of a great kid who almost didn't make it. Sandy showed up in my office at Columbia 1 week before graduation. She wanted to change her major to psychology. This is basically a wacky request, but I sensed her desperation and listened carefully to her story. When I looked over her record, it was filled with A+s and Fs. What was going on? Sandy had been groomed by her parents to go to Harvard. Because of their fixed mindset, the only goal of Sandy's education was to prove her worth and competence, and perhaps theirs, by gaining admission to Harvard. Going there would mean that she was truly intelligent. For them, it was not about learning. It was not about pursuing her love of science. It was not even about making a great contribution. It was about the label. But she didn't get in. And she fell into a depression that had plagued her ever since. Sometimes she managed to work effectively, the A+s, but sometimes she did not, the Fs. I knew that if I didn't help her she wouldn't graduate, and if she didn't graduate she wouldn't be able to face her parents. And if she couldn't face her parents, I didn't know what would happen. I was legitimately able to help Sandy graduate, but that isn't really the point. It's a real tragedy to take a brilliant and wonderful kid like Sandy and crush her with the weight of these labels. I hope these stories will teach parents to want the best for their children in the right way by fostering their interests, growth, and learning. Wanting the best in the worst way. Let's look more closely at the message from Sandy's parents. We don't care about who you are, what you're interested in, and what you can become. We don't care about learning. We will love and respect you only if you go to Harvard. Mark's parents felt the same way. Mark was an exceptional math student, and as he finished junior high he was excited about going to Stuyvesant High School, a special high school in New York with a strong math and science curriculum. There, he would study math with the best teachers and talk math with the most advanced students in the city. Stuyvesant also had a program that would let him take college math courses at Columbia as soon as he was ready. But at the last moment, his parents would not let him go. They had heard that it was hard to get into Harvard from Stuyvesant. So, they made him go to a different high school. It didn't matter that he wouldn't be able to pursue his interests or develop his talents as well. Only one thing mattered, and it starts with an H. We love you on our terms. It's not just I'm judging you. It's I'm judging you and I'll only love you if you succeed on my terms. We've studied kids ranging from 6 years old to college age. Those with the fixed mindset feel their parents won't love and respect them unless they fulfill their parents' aspirations for them. The college students say, I often feel like my parents won't value me if I'm not as successful as they would like. Or, my parents say I can be anything I like, but deep down I feel they won't approve of me unless I pursue a profession they admire. John McEnroe's father was like that. He was judgmental. Everything was black and white and he put on the pressure. My parents pushed me, my dad was the one mainly. He seemed to live for my growing little junior career. I remember telling my dad that I wasn't enjoying it. I'd say, do you have to come to every match? Do you have to come to this practice? Can't you take one off? McEnroe brought his father the success he craved, but McEnroe didn't enjoy a moment of it. He says he enjoyed the consequences of his success being at the top, the adulation, and the money. However, he says, many athletes seem truly to love to play their sport. I don't think I ever felt that way about tennis. I think he did love it at the very beginning, because he talks about how at first he was fascinated by all the different ways you could hit a ball and create new shots. But we never hear about that kind of fascination again. Mr. McEnroe saw his boy was good at tennis and on went the pressure, the judgment, and the love that depended on his son's success. Tiger Woods' father presents a contrast. There's no doubt that this guy is ambitious. He also sees his son as a chosen person with a God-given destiny, but he fostered Tiger's love of golf and raised Tiger to focus on growth and learning. If Tiger had wanted to be a plumber, I wouldn't have minded, as long as he was a hell of a plumber. The goal was for him to be a good person. He's a great person. Tiger says in return, my parents have been the biggest influence in my life. They taught me to give of myself, my time, talent, and, most of all, my love. This shows that you can have super involved parents who still foster the child's own growth, rather than replacing it with their own pressure and judgments. Dorothy DeLay, the famous violin teacher, encountered pressure cooker parents all the time. Parents who cared more about talent, image, and labels than about the child's long-term learning. One set of parents brought their 8-year-old boy to play for DeLay. Despite her warnings, they had made him memorize the Beethoven Violin Concerto. He was note perfect, but he played like a frightened robot. They had, in fact, ruined his playing to suit their idea of talent, as in, my 8-year-old can play the Beethoven Violin Concerto. What can yours do? DeLay spent countless hours with a mother who insisted it was time for her son to be signed by a fancy talent agency. But had she followed DeLay's advice? No. For quite a while, DeLay had been warning her that her son didn't have a large enough repertoire. Rather than heeding the expert advice and fostering her son's development, however, the mother refused to believe that anyone could turn down a talent like his for such a slight reason. In sharp contrast was Ura Lee's mother. Mrs. Lee always sat serenely during Ura's lesson, without the tension and frantic note-taking of some of the other parents. She smiled, she swayed to the music, she enjoyed herself. As a result, Ura did not develop the anxieties and insecurities that children with over-invested, judgmental parents do. Says Ura, I'm always happy when I play. Ideals. Isn't it natural for parents to set goals and have ideals for their children? Yes, but some ideals are helpful and others are not. We asked college students to describe their ideal of a successful student. And we asked them to tell us how they thought they measured up to that ideal. Students with the fixed mindset described ideals that could not be worked toward. You had it or you didn't. The ideal successful student is one who comes in with innate talent, genius, physically fit and good at sports. They got there based on natural ability. Did they think they measured up to their ideal? Mostly not. Instead, they said these ideals disrupted their thinking, made them procrastinate, made them give up, and made them stressed out. They were demoralized by the ideal they could never hope to be. Students with the growth mindset described ideals like these. A successful student is one whose primary goal is to expand their knowledge and their ways of thinking and investigating the world. They do not see grades as an end in themselves but as means to continue to grow. Or, the ideal student values knowledge for its own sake, as well as for its instrumental uses. He or she hopes to make a contribution to society at large. Were they similar to their ideal? They were working toward it. As similar as I can be. Hey, it takes effort. Or, I believed for many years that grades/tests were the most important thing, but I am trying to move beyond that. Their ideals were inspiring to them. When parents give their children a fixed mindset ideal, they are asking them to fit the mold of the brilliant, talented child, or be deemed unworthy. There is no room for error. And there is no room for the children's individuality, their interests, their quirks, their desires and values. I can hardly count the times fixed mindset parents have wrung their hands and told me how their children were rebelling or dropping out. Haim Janot describes Nicholas, age 17. In my father's mind there is a picture of an ideal son. When he compares him to me, he is deeply disappointed. I don't live up to my father's dream. Since early childhood, I sensed his disappointment. He tried to hide it, but it came out in 100 little ways, in his tone, in his words, in his silence. He tried hard to make me a carbon copy of his dreams. When he failed, he gave up on me. But he left a deep scar, a permanent feeling of failure. When parents help their children construct growth-minded ideals, they are giving them something they can strive for. They are also giving their children growing room to grow into full human beings who will make their contribution to society in a way that excites them. I have rarely heard a growth-minded parent say, "I am disappointed in my child." Instead, with a beaming smile, they say, "I am amazed at the incredible person my child has become." Everything I've said about parents applies to teachers, too. But teachers have additional concerns. They face large classes of students with differing skills, whose past learning they've had no part in. What's the best way to educate these students? Teachers, and parents. What makes a great teacher, or parent? Many educators think that lowering their standards will give students success experiences, boost their self-esteem, and raise their achievement. It comes from the same philosophy as the overpraising of students' intelligence. Well, it doesn't work. Lowering standards just leads to poorly educated students who feel entitled to easy work and lavish praise. For 35 years, Sheila Schwartz taught aspiring English teachers. She tried to set high standards, especially since they were going to pass on their knowledge to generations of children. But they became indignant. One student, whose writing was full of grammatical mistakes and misspellings, she says, marched into my office with her husband from West Point in a dress uniform, his chest covered with ribbons, because her feelings had been hurt by my insistence on correct spelling. Another student was asked to summarize the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee's novel about a Southern lawyer fighting prejudice and, unsuccessfully, defending a black man accused of murder. The student insisted the theme was that all people are basically nice. When Schwartz questioned that conclusion, the student left the class and reported her to the dean. Schwartz was reprimanded for having standards that were too high. Why? Schwartz asks, Should the low standards of these future teachers be honored above the needs of the children they will one day teach? On the other hand, simply raising standards in our schools, without giving students the means of reaching them, is a recipe for disaster. It just pushes the poorly prepared or poorly motivated students into failure and out of school. Is there a way to set standards high and have students reach them? In Chapter 3, we saw in the work of Fauco Reinberg that teachers with the growth mindset brought many low achievers up into the high-achieving range. We saw in the growth-minded teaching of Jamie Escalante that inner-city high school students could learn college calculus, and in the growth-minded teaching of Marva Collins that inner-city grade school children could read Shakespeare. In this chapter, we'll see more. We'll see how growth-oriented teaching unleashes children's minds. I'll focus on 3 great teachers, 2 who worked with students who are considered disadvantaged and 1 who worked with students considered super talented. What do these great teachers have in common? Great teachers. The great teachers believe in the growth of the intellect and talent, and they are fascinated with the process of learning. Marva Collins taught Chicago children who had been judged and discarded. For many, her classroom was their last stop. 1 boy had been in and out of 13 schools in 4 years. 1 stabbed children with pencils and had been thrown out of a mental health center. 1 8-year-old would remove the blade from the pencil sharpener and cut up his classmates' coats, hats, gloves, and scarves. 1 child referred to killing himself in almost every sentence. 1 hit another student with a hammer on his first day. These children hadn't learned much in school, but everyone knew it was their own fault. Everyone but Collins. When 60 Minutes did a segment on Collins's classroom, Morley Safer tried his best to get a child to say he didn't like the school. It's so hard here. There's no recess. There's no gym. They work you all day. You have only 40 minutes for lunch. Why do you like it? It's just too hard. But the student replied, that's why I like it, because it makes your brains bigger. Chicago Sun-Times writer A. Smith interviewed one of the children. We do hard things here. They fill your brain. As Collins looks back on how she got started, she says, I have always been fascinated with learning, with the process of discovering something new, and it was exciting to share in the discoveries made by my students. On the first day of school, she always promised her students, all students, that they would learn. She forged a contract with them. I know most of you can't spell your name. You don't know the alphabet, you don't know how to read, you don't know homonyms, or how to syllabicate. I promise you that you will. None of you has ever failed. School may have failed you. Well, goodbye to failure. Children, welcome to success. You will read hard books and hear and understand what you read. You will write every day, but you must help me to help you. If you don't give anything, don't expect anything. Success is not coming to you, you must come to it. Her joy in her students' learning was enormous. As they changed from children who arrived with toughened faces and glassed over eyes to children who were beginning to brim with enthusiasm, she told them, I don't know what St. Peter has planned for me, but you children are giving me my heaven on earth. Rafe Esquith teaches Los Angeles second graders from poor areas plagued with crime. Many live with people who have drug, alcohol, and emotional problems. Every day he tells his students that he is no smarter than they are, just more experienced. He constantly makes them see how much they have grown intellectually, how assignments that were once hard have become easier because of their practice and discipline. Unlike Collins's school or Esquith's school, the Juilliard School of Music accepts only the most talented students in the world. You would think the idea would be, you're all talented, now let's get down to learning. But if anything, the idea of talent and genius looms even larger there. In fact, many teachers mentally weeded out the students they weren't going to bother with. Except for Dorothy DeLay, the wondrous violin teacher of Itzhak Perlman, Midori, and Sarah Chang. DeLay's husband always teased her about her Midwestern belief that anything is possible. Here is the empty prairie, let's build a city. That's exactly why she loved teaching. For her, teaching was about watching something grow before her very eyes. And the challenge was to figure out how to make it happen. If students didn't play in tune, it was because they hadn't learned how. Her mentor and fellow teacher at Juilliard, Ivan Galamian, would say, "Oh, he has no ear. Don't waste your time." But she would insist on experimenting with different ways of changing that. How can I do it? And she usually found a way. As more and more students wanted a part of this mindset, and as she wasted more and more of her time on these efforts, Galamian tried to get the president of Juilliard to fire her. It's interesting. Both Delay and Galamian valued talent, but Galamian believed that talent was inborn and Delay believed that it was a quality that could be acquired. I think it's too easy for a teacher to say, "Oh, this child wasn't born with it, so I won't waste my time." Too many teachers hide their own lack of ability behind that statement. Delay gave her all to every one of her students. Itzhak Perlman was her student, and so was his wife, Toby, who says that very few teachers get even a fraction of an Itzhak Perlman in a lifetime. She got the whole thing, but I don't believe she gave him more than she gave me, and I believe I am just one of many, many such people. Once Delay was asked about another student, why she gave so much time to a pupil who showed so little promise. "I think she has something special, it's in her person. There is some kind of dignity. If Delay could get her to put it into her playing, that student would be a special violinist." High standards and a nurturing atmosphere. Great teachers set high standards for all their students, not just the ones who are already achieving. Marva Collins set extremely high standards, right from the start. She introduced words and concepts that were, at first, way above what her students could grasp. Yet she established on day one an atmosphere of genuine affection and concern, as she promised students they would produce. "I'm gonna love you, I love you already, and I'm going to love you even when you don't love yourself," she said to the boy. Who wouldn't try? Do teachers have to love all of their students? No, but they have to care about every single student. Teachers with the fixed mindset create an atmosphere of judging. These teachers look at students' beginning performance and decide who's smart and who's dumb. Then they give up on the dumb ones. They're not my responsibility. These teachers don't believe in improvement, so they don't try to create it. Remember the fixed mindset teachers in Chapter 3. Who said, "According to my experience, students' achievement mostly remains constant in the course of a year. As a teacher, I have no influence on students' intellectual ability." This is how stereotypes work. Stereotypes tell teachers which groups are bright and which groups are not. So teachers with the fixed mindset know which students to give up on before they've even met them. More on high standards and a nurturing atmosphere. When Benjamin Bloom studied his 120 world-class concert pianists, sculptors, swimmers, tennis players, mathematicians, and research neurologists, he found something fascinating. For most of them, their first teachers were incredibly warm and accepting. Not that they set low standards. Not at all, but they created an atmosphere of trust, not judgment. It was, "I'm going to teach you, not I'm going to judge your talent." As you look at what Collins and Esquith demanded of their students, it's almost shocking. When Collins expanded her school to include young children, she required that every 4-year-old who started in September be reading by Christmas. And they all were. The 3- and 4-year-olds used a vocabulary book titled Vocabulary for the High School Student. The 7-year-olds were reading the Wall Street Journal. For older children, a discussion of Plato's Republic led to discussions of de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, Orwell's Animal Farm, Machiavelli, and the Chicago City Council. Her reading list for the late grade school children included the complete plays of Anton Chekhov, Physics Through Experiment, and the Canterbury Tales. Oh, and always Shakespeare. Even the boys who picked their teeth with switchblades, she says, loved Shakespeare and always begged for more. Yet Collins maintained an extremely nurturing atmosphere. A very strict and disciplined one, but a loving one. Realizing that her students were coming from teachers who made a career of telling them what was wrong with them, she quickly made known her complete commitment to them as her students and as people. Esquith bemoans the lowering of standards. Recently, he tells us, his school celebrated reading scores that were 20 points below the national average. Why? Because they were a point or two higher than the year before. Maybe it's important to look for the good and be optimistic, he says, but delusion is not the answer. Those who celebrate failure will not be around to help. Today's students celebrate their jobs flipping burgers. Someone has to tell children if they are behind, and lay out a plan of attack to help them catch up. All of his fifth graders master a reading list that includes of Mice and Men, Native Son, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, The Joy Luck Club, The Diary of Anne Frank, To Kill a Mockingbird, and A Separate Piece. Every one of his sixth graders passes an algebra final that would reduce most 8th and 9th graders to tears. But again, all is achieved in an atmosphere of affection and deep personal commitment to every student. Challenge and Nurture describes DeLay's approach to one of her former students expresses it this way: that is part of Miss DeLay's genius to put people in the frame of mind where they can do their best. Very few teachers can actually get you to your ultimate potential. Miss DeLay has that gift. She challenges you at the same time that you feel you are being nurtured. Hard work and more hard work. But are challenge and love enough? Not quite. All great teachers teach students how to reach the high standards. Collins and Esquith didn't hand their students a reading list and wish them bon voyage. Collins's students read and discussed every line of Macbeth in class. Esquith spent hours planning what chapters they would read in class. I know which child will handle the challenge of the most difficult paragraphs, and carefully plan a passage for the shy youngster, who will begin his journey as a good reader. Nothing is left to chance, it takes enormous energy. But to be in a room with young minds who hang on every word of a classic book and beg for more if I stop makes all the planning worthwhile. What are they teaching the students en route? To love learning. To eventually learn and think for themselves. And to work hard on the fundamentals. Esquith's class often met before school, after school, and on school vacations to master the fundamentals of English and math, especially as the work got harder. His motto: there are no shortcuts. Collins echoes that idea as she tells her class, there is no magic here. Mrs. Collins is no miracle worker. I do not walk on water, I do not part the sea. I just love children and work harder than a lot of people, and so will you. DeLay expected a lot from her students, but she, too, guided them there. Most students are intimidated by the idea of talent, and it keeps them in a fixed mindset. But DeLay demystified talent. One student was sure he couldn't play a piece as fast as Itzhak Perlman. So she didn't let him see the metronome until he had achieved it. I know so surely that if he had been handling that metronome, as he approached that number, he would have said to himself, I can never do this as fast as Itzhak Perlman, and he would have stopped himself. Another student was intimidated by the beautiful sound made by talented violinists. We were working on my sound, and there was this one note I played, and Miss DeLay stopped me and said, now that is a beautiful sound. She then explained how every note has to have a beautiful beginning, middle, and end, leading into the next note. And he thought, wow. If I can do it there, I can do it everywhere. Suddenly the beautiful sound of Perlman made sense and was not just an overwhelming concept. When students don't know how to do something and others do, the gap seems unbridgeable. Some educators try to reassure their students that they're just fine as they are. Growth-minded teachers tell students the truth and then give them the tools to close the gap. As Marva Collins said to a boy who was clowning around in class, you are in 6th grade and your reading score is 1.1. I don't hide your scores in a folder. I tell them to you so you know what you have to do. Now your clowning days are over. Then they got down to work. Students who don't care. What about students who won't work, who don't care to learn? Here is a shortened version of an interaction between Collins and Gary, a student who refused to work, ripped up his homework, assignments, and would not participate in class. Collins is trying to get him to go to the blackboard to do some problems. Collins, sweetheart, what are you going to do? Use your life or throw it away? Gary, I'm not gonna do any damn work. Collins, I am not going to give up on you. I am not going to let you give up on yourself. If you sit there leaning against this wall all day, you are going to end up leaning on something or someone all your life. And all that brilliance bottled up inside, you will go to waste. At that, Gary agreed to go to the board, but then refused to address the work there. After a while Collins said, if you do not want to participate, go to the telephone and tell your mother, in this school we have to learn an MRS. Collins says I can't fool around, so will you please pick me up? Gary started writing. Eventually, Gary became an eager participant and an avid writer. Later that year, the class was discussing Macbeth and how his misguided thinking led him to commit murder. It's sort of like Socrates says, isn't it, Miss Collins? Gary piped up. Macbeth should have known that straight thinking leads to straight living. For a class assignment, he wrote, Somnus, god of sleep, please awaken us. While we sleep, ignorance takes over the world, take your spell off us. We don't have long before ignorance makes a coup d'etat of the world. When teachers are judging them, students will sabotage the teacher by not trying. But when students understand that school is for them, a way for them to grow their minds, they do not insist on sabotaging themselves. In my work, I have seen tough guys shed tears when they realize they can become smarter. It's common for students to turn off to school and adopt an air of indifference, but we make a mistake if we think any student stops caring. Growth-minded teachers, who are these people? How can growth-minded teachers be so selfless, devoting untold hours to the worst students? Are they just saints? Is it reasonable to expect that everyone can become a saint? The answer is that they're not entirely selfless. They love to learn. And teaching is a wonderful way to learn about people and how they tick. About what you teach. About yourself. And about life. Fixed-minded teachers often think of themselves as finished products. Their role is simply to impart their knowledge. But doesn't that get boring year after year? Standing before yet another crowd of faces and imparting. Now, that's hard. Seymour Saracen was a professor of mine when I was in graduate school. He was a wonderful educator, and he always told us to question assumptions. There's an assumption, he said, that schools are for students learning. Well, why aren't they just as much for teachers learning? I never forgot that. In all of my teaching, I think about what I find fascinating and what I would love to learn more about. I use my teaching to grow, and that makes me, even after all these years, a fresh and eager teacher. One of Marva Collins's first mentors taught her the same thing. That, above all, a good teacher is one who continues to learn along with the students. And she let her students know that right up front. Sometimes I don't like other grown UPS very much because they think they know everything. I don't know everything. I can learn all the time. It's been said that Dorothy DeLay was an extraordinary teacher because she was not interested in teaching. She was interested in learning. So, are great teachers born or made? Can anyone be a Collins, Esquith, or DeLay? It starts with the growth mindset about yourself and about children. Not just lip service to the idea that all children can learn, but a deep desire to reach in and ignite the mind of every child. Michael Lewis, in the New York Times, tells of a coach who did this for him. I had a new taste for extra work, and it didn't take long to figure out how much better my life could be if I applied this new zeal acquired on a baseball field to the rest of it. It was as if this baseball coach had reached inside me, found a rusty switch marked turn on before attempting to use and flipped it. Coaches are teachers, too, but their students' successes and failures are played out in front of crowds, published in the newspapers, and written into the record books. Their jobs rest on producing winners. Let's look closely at 3 legendary coaches to see their mindsets in action. Coaches, winning through mindset. Everyone who knows me well laughs when I say someone is complicated. What do you think of so-and-so? Oh, he's complicated. It's usually not a compliment. It means that so-and-so may be capable of great charm, warmth, and generosity, but there's an undercurrent of ego that can erupt at any time. You never really know when you can trust him. The fixed mindset makes people complicated. It makes them worried about their fixed traits and creates the need to document them, sometimes at your expense. And it makes them judgmental. The fixed mindset coach in action. Bobby Knight, the famous and controversial college basketball coach, is complicated. He could be unbelievably kind. One time he passed up an important and lucrative opportunity to be a sportscaster, because a former player of his had been in a bad accident. Knight rushed to his side and saw him through the ordeal. He could be extremely gracious. After the basketball team he coached won the Olympic gold medal, he insisted that the team pay homage first and foremost to coach Henry Iba. Iba had never been given proper respect for his Olympic accomplishments, and in whatever way he could, Knight wanted to make up for it. He had the team carry Coach Iba around the floor on their shoulders. Knight cared greatly about his players' academic records. He wanted them to get an education, and he had a firm rule against missing classes or tutoring sessions. But he could also be cruel, and this cruelty came from the fixed mindset. John Feinstein, author of Season on the Brink, a book about Knight and his team, tells us, Knight was incapable of accepting failure. Every defeat was personal. His team lost, a team he had selected and coached. Failure on any level all but destroyed him, especially failure in coaching, because it was coaching that gave him his identity, made him special, set him apart. A loss made him a failure, obliterated his identity. So when he was your coach, when your wins and losses measured him, he was mercilessly judgmental. His demeaning of players who let him down was, hopefully, without parallel. In Daryl Thomas, Feinstein says, Knight saw a player of huge potential. Thomas had what coaches call a million-dollar body. He was big and strong, but also fast. He could shoot the ball with his left hand or his right hand. Knight couldn't live with the thought that Thomas and his million-dollar body weren't bringing the team success. You know what you are, Daryl? You are the worst pussy I've ever seen play basketball at this school. The absolute worst pussy ever. You have more goddamn ability than 95% of the players we've had here, but you are a pussy from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. An absolute pussy. That's my assessment of you after 3 years. To make a similar point, Knight once put a Tampax in a player's locker. Thomas was a sensitive guy. An assistant coach had given this advice: when he's calling you an asshole, don't listen. But when he starts telling you why you're an asshole, listen. That way, you'll get better. Thomas couldn't follow that advice. He heard everything. And, after the tirade, he broke down right there on the basketball court. The axe of judgment came down on players who had the audacity to lose a game. Often Knight did not let the guilty parties ride back home with the rest of the team. They were no longer worthy of respectful treatment. One time, after his team reached the semifinals of a national tournament, but not the national tournament, he was asked by an interviewer what he liked best about the team. What I like best about this team right now, Knight answered, is the fact that I only have to watch it play one more time. Some players could take it better than others. Steve Alford, who went on to have a professional career, had come to Indiana with clear goals in mind and was able to maintain a strong growth focus. Much of the time, he was able to hear and use Knight's wisdom, and, for the most part, ignore the obscene or demeaning parts of the tirades. But even he describes how the team broke down under The yoke of Knight's judgments, and how he himself became so personally unhappy at some points that he lost his zest for the sport. The atmosphere was poisonous, when I had been playing well. I had always stayed upbeat, no matter how much coach yelled, but now his negativism, piled on top of my own, was drowning me. Mom and Dad were concerned. They could see the love of the game going out of me. The Holy Grail, no mistakes. Says Alford, Coach's Holy Grail was the mistake-free game. Oh. We know which mindset makes mistakes intolerable. And Knight's explosions were legendary. There was the time he threw the chair across the court. There was the time he yanked his player off the court by his jersey. There was the time he grabbed his player by the neck. He often tried to justify his behavior by saying he was toughening the team up, preparing them to play under pressure. But the truth is, he couldn't control himself. Was the chair a teaching exercise? Was the chokehold educational? He motivated his players, not through respect for them, but through intimidation, through fear. They feared his judgments and explosions. Did it work? Sometimes it worked. He had 3 championship teams. In the season on the brink, described by John Feinstein, the team did not have size, experience, or quickness, but they were contenders. They won 21 games, thanks to Knight's great basketball knowledge and coaching skills. But other times, it didn't work. Individual players or the team as a whole broke down. In the season on the brink, they collapsed at the end of the season. The year before, too, the team had collapsed under Knight's pressure. Over the years, some players had escaped by transferring to other schools, by breaking the rules, like cutting classes or skipping tutoring sessions, or by going early to the pros, like Isaiah Thomas. On a world tour, the players often sat around fantasizing about where they should have gone to school, if they hadn't made the mistake of choosing Indiana. It's not that Knight had a fixed mindset about his players' ability. He firmly believed in their capacity to develop. But he had a fixed mindset about himself and his coaching ability. The team was his product, and they had to prove his ability every time out. They were not allowed to lose games, make mistakes, or question him in any way, because that would reflect on his competence. Nor did he seem to analyze his motivational strategies when they weren't working. Maybe Daryl Thomas needed another kind of incentive aside from ridicule or humiliation. What are we to make of this complicated man as a mentor to young players? His biggest star, Isaiah Thomas, expresses his profound ambivalence about Knight. You know, there were times when if I had a gun, I think I would have shot him. And there were other times when I wanted to put my arms around him, hug him, and tell him I loved him. I would not consider myself an unqualified success if my best student had considered shooting me. The growth mindset coach in action. A coach for all seasons. Coach John Wooden produced one of the greatest championships records in sports. He led the UCLA basketball team to the NCAA championship in 1964, 1965, 1967, 1968, 1969, 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973, and 1975. There were seasons when his team was undefeated, and they once had an 88-game winning streak. All this I sort of knew. What I didn't know was that when Wooden arrived at UCLA, it was a far cry from a basketball dynasty. In fact, he didn't want to work at UCLA at all. He wanted to go to Minnesota. It was arranged that Minnesota would phone him at 6 o'clock on a certain evening to tell him if he had the job. He told UCLA to call him at 7. No one called at 6, 6:30, or even 6:45. So when UCLA called at 7, he said yes. No sooner had he hung up than the call from Minnesota came. A storm had messed up the phone lines and prevented the 6 o'clock phone call with the job offer from getting through. UCLA had grossly inadequate facilities. For his first 16 years, Wooden held practice in a crowded, dark, and poorly ventilated gym, known as the BO Barn because of the Atmospheric effect of the sweating bodies. In the same gym, there were often wrestling matches, gymnastics training, trampoline, jumping, and cheerleading workouts going on alongside basketball practice. There was also no place for the games. For the first few years, they had to use the BO barn, and then for 14 more years, they had to travel around the region borrowing gyms from schools and towns. Then there were the players. When he put them through their first practice, he was shattered. They were so bad that if he'd had an honorable way to back out of the job, he would have. The press had, perceptively, picked his team to finish last in their division. But Wooden went to work, and this laughable team did not finish last. It won the division title, with 22 wins and 7 losses for the season. The next year, they went to the NCAA playoffs. What did he give them? He gave them constant training in the basic skills, he gave them conditioning, and he gave them mindset. The Holy Grail, full preparation and full effort. Wooden was not complicated. He was wise and interesting, but not complicated. He was just a straight-ahead growth mindset guy who lived by this rule: you have to apply yourself each day to becoming a little better. By applying yourself to the task of becoming a little better each and every day over a period of time, you will become a lot better. He didn't ask for mistake-free games. He didn't demand that his players never lose. He asked for full preparation and full effort from them. Did I win? Did I lose? Those are the wrong questions. The correct question is, did I make my best effort? If so, he says, you may be outscored but you will never lose. He was not a softie. He did not tolerate coasting. If the players were coasting during practice, he turned out the lights and left. Gentlemen, practice is over. They had lost their opportunity to become better that day. Equal treatment. Like delay, Wooden gave equal time and attention to all of his players, regardless of their initial skills. They, in turn, gave all, and blossomed. Here is Wooden talking about 2 new players when they arrived at UCLA. I looked at each one to see what he had and then said to myself, oh gracious, if he can make a real contribution, a playing contribution, to our team, then we must be pretty lousy. However, what I couldn't see was what these men had inside. Both gave just about everything they could possibly give, and both became starters, one as the starting center on a national championship team. He respected all players equally. You know how some players' numbers are retired after they move on, in homage to their greatness? No player's number was retired while Wooden was coach, although he had some of the greatest players of all time, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton. Later on, when their numbers were retired, he was against it. Other fellows who played on our team also wore those numbers. Some of those other players gave me close to everything they had. The jersey and the number on it never belonged to just one single player, no matter how great or how big a star that particular player is. It goes against the whole concept of what a team is. Wait a minute. He was in the business of winning games. Don't you have to go with your talented players and give less to the second stringers? Well, he didn't play all players equally, but he gave to all players equally. For example, when he recruited another player the same year as Bill Walton, he told him that he would play very little in actual games because of Walton. But he promised him, by the time you graduate you'll get a pro contract. You'll be that good. By his 3rd year, the player was giving Bill Walton all he could handle in practice. And when he turned pro, he was named Rookie of the Year in his league. Preparing players for life. Was Wooden a genius, a magician able to turn mediocre players into champions? Actually, he admits that in terms of basketball tactics and strategies, he was quite average. What he was really good at was analyzing and motivating his players. With these skills, he was able to help his players fulfill their potential, not just in basketball, but in life, something he found even more rewarding than winning games. Did Wooden's methods work? Aside from the 10 championship titles, we have the testimony of his players, none of whom refer to firearms. Bill Walton, Hall of Famer. Of course, the real competition he was preparing us for was life. He taught us the values and characteristics that could make us not only good players, but also good people. Denny Crum, successful coach. I can't imagine what my life would have been had Coach Wooden not been my guiding light. As the years pass, I appreciate him more and more and can only pray that I can have half as much influence on the young people I coach as he has had on me. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hall of Famer. The wisdom of Coach Wooden had a profound influence on me as an athlete, but an even greater influence on me as a human being. He is responsible, in part, for the person I am today. Listen to this story. It was the moment of victory. UCLA had just won its first national championship. But Coach Wooden was worried about Fred Slaughter, a player who had started every game and had had a brilliant year up until this final championship game. The game had not been going well, and, as it got worse and worse, Wooden felt a change had to be made. So he pulled Fred. The replacement player did a great job, and Wooden left him in until the game was virtually won. The victory was a peak moment. Not only had they just won their first NCAA title by beating Duke, but they had ended the season with 30 wins and 0 losses. Yet Wooden's concern for Fred dampened his euphoria. As Wooden left the press conference and went to find Fred, he opened the door to the dressing room. Fred was waiting for him. "Coach, I want you to know I understand. You had to leave Doug in there because he played so well, and I didn't. I wanted to play in the worst way, but I do understand, and if anyone says I was upset, it's not true. Disappointed, yes, but upset, no. And I was very happy for Doug. There are coaches out there," Wooden says, "who have won championships with the dictator approach, among them Vince Lombardi and Bobby Knight. I had a different philosophy. For me, concern, compassion, and consideration were always priorities of the highest order. Read the story of Fred Slaughter again and you tell me whether, under the same circumstances, Coach Knight would have rushed to console Daryl Thomas. And would Knight have allowed Thomas to reach down to find his pride, dignity, and generosity in his moment of disappointment? Which is the enemy, success or failure?" Pat Summitt was the coach of the Tennessee women's basketball team. The Lady Volumes. She coached them to 8 national championships. She didn't come into the game with Wooden's philosophical attitude, but was at first more Knight-like in her stance. Every time the team lost, she couldn't let go of it. She continued to live it, beating it to death and torturing herself and the team with it. Then she graduated to a love-hate relationship with losing. Emotionally, it still made her feel sick. But she loved what it did. It forces everyone, players and coaches, to develop a more complete game. It was success that had become the enemy. Wooden calls it being infected with success. Pat Riley, former coach of the championship Los Angeles Lakers team, calls it the disease of me thinking you are the success, and chucking the discipline and the work that got you there. Summitt explained. Success lulls you. It makes the most ambitious of us complacent and sloppy. As Summitt spoke, Tennessee had won 5 NCAA championships, but only once when they were favored to win. On every other occasion, we were upset. We've lost as many as 4 or 5 titles that we were predicted to win. After the 1996 championship, the team was complacent. The older players were the national champions, and the new players expected to be swept to victory merely by being at Tennessee. It was a disaster. They began to lose and lose badly. On December 15, they were crushed by Stanford on their own home court. A few games later, they were crushed again. Now they had 5 losses. And everyone had given up on them. The North Carolina coach, meaning to comfort Summitt, told her, "Well, just hang in there till next year." HBO had come to Tennessee to film a documentary. But now the producers were looking for another team. Even her assistants were thinking they wouldn't make it into the March championship playoffs. So before the next game, Summitt met with the team for 5 hours. That night, they played Old Dominion, the second-ranked team in the country. For the first time that season, they gave all. But they lost again. It was devastating. They had invested, gone for it, and still lost. Some were sobbing so hard, they couldn't speak. Or even breathe. Get your heads up, Summit told them. If you give effort like this all the time, if you fight like this, I'm telling you, I promise you, we'll be there in March. 2 months later, they were the national champions. Conclusion? Beware of success. It can knock you into a fixed mindset. I won because I have talent. Therefore I will keep winning. Success can infect a team or it can infect an individual. Alex Rodriguez, the baseball star, was not infected with success. You never stay the same, he says. You either go one way or the other. False growth mindset. I have seen many parents, teachers, and coaches apply growth mindset concepts in the most spectacular ways, with wonderful results. Using mindset principles, many schools and sports teams have risen to the top. They've been recognized for their outstanding culture of learning and teamwork, and for their exceptional achievements. Needless to say, this has been extremely gratifying. Then, a couple of years ago, my colleague in Australia, Susan Mackey, told me she was seeing an outbreak of false growth mindset. I didn't know what she was talking about. In fact, I was a bit irritated. Isn't a growth mindset a pretty simple and straightforward idea? Why would anyone have a false growth mindset if they could have a real one? But she had planted the seed, and as I went about my business, I soon realized what she meant. Some parents, teachers, and coaches were indeed misunderstanding the mindset ideas. All at once I became determined to understand their misunderstandings and to figure out how to correct them. So let's take a closer look at 1. What a growth mindset is and is not, 2. How to achieve it, and 3. How to pass it on to others. What a growth mindset is and is not. A growth mindset is about believing people can develop their abilities. It's that simple. It can have many repercussions, but that's what it is at its core. Nonetheless, many people project a different meaning onto it. Misunderstanding number 1. Many people take what they like about themselves and call it a growth mindset. If they're open-minded or flexible, they say they have a growth mindset. I often hear people calling it an open mindset. But there's a difference between being flexible or open-minded and being dedicated to growing talent. And if people drift away from the actual meaning of a growth mindset, they drift away from its benefits. They can bask in their own wonderful qualities, but they may never do the hard work of cultivating their own abilities or the abilities of their children or students. Misunderstanding number 2. Many people believe that a growth mindset is only about effort, especially praising effort. I talked earlier about how praising the process children engage in their hard work, strategies, focus, perseverance can foster a growth mindset. In this way, children learn that the process they engage in brings about progress and learning, and that their learning does not just magically flow from some innate ability. The first important thing to remember here is that the process includes more than just effort. Certainly, we want children to appreciate the fruits of hard work. But we also want them to understand the importance of trying new strategies when the one they're using isn't working. We don't want them to just try harder with the same ineffective strategy. And we want them to ask for help or input from others when it's needed. This is the process we want them to appreciate: hard work, trying new strategies, and seeking input from others. Another pitfall is praising effort, or any part of the process that's not there. More than once, parents have said to me, "I praise my child's effort but it's not working." I immediately ask, was your child actually trying hard? "Well, not really," comes the sheepish reply. We should never think that praising a process that is not there will bring good results. But a problem that's of even greater concern to me is the fact that some teachers and coaches are using effort praise as a consolation prize when kids are not learning. If a student has tried hard and made little or no progress, we can of course appreciate their effort, but we should never be content with effort that is not yielding further benefits. We need to figure out why that effort is not effective and guide kids toward other strategies and resources that can help them resume learning. Recently, someone asked me, "What keeps you up at night?" And I said, it's the fear that the mindset concept will be used to make kids feel good when they're not learning, just like the failed self-esteem movement. The growth mindset is meant to help kids learn, not to paper over the fact that they are not learning. Finally, when people realize I'm the mindset person, they often say, "Oh, yeah. Praise the process, not the outcome, right?" Well, not quite. This is such a common misconception. In all of our research on praise, we indeed praise the process, but we tie it to the outcome, that is, to children's learning, progress, or achievements. Children need to understand that engaging in that process helped them learn. Not long ago, a mother told me how very frustrating it was that she was not allowed to praise her daughter when the child did something wonderful, that she could only praise her when she was struggling. No. 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 Of course you can appreciate your children's wonderful accomplishments, but then tie those accomplishments to the process they engaged in. And remember, we don't have to always be praising. Inquiring about the child's process and just showing interest in it goes a very long way. Misunderstanding number 3. A growth mindset equals telling kids they can do anything. Many's the time I've heard educators say, "I've always had a growth mindset. I always tell my students, you can do anything." Few people believe in children's potential as much as I do, or yearn to see all children fulfill their enormous promise. But it doesn't happen by simply telling them, you can do anything. It happens by helping them gain the skills and find the resources to make progress toward their goals. Otherwise, it's an empty reassurance. It puts the onus entirely on the student and may make them feel like a failure if they don't reach their goals. One final word about putting the onus on the student. It broke my heart to learn that some educators and coaches were blaming kids for having a fixed mindset, scolding or criticizing them for not displaying growth mindset qualities. Notice that these adults were absolving themselves of the responsibility, not only for teaching a growth mindset but also for the child's learning. I can't teach this child. He has a fixed mindset. Let's be totally clear here. We as educators must take seriously our responsibility to create growth mindset friendly environments where kids feel safe from judgment, where they understand that we believe in their potential to grow, and where they know that we are totally dedicated to collaborating with them on their learning. We are in the business of helping kids thrive, not finding reasons why they can't. How do you get a true growth mindset? You don't get a growth mindset by proclamation. You move toward it by taking a journey. As a growth mindset gained currency and became the correct way to think in some quarters, more and more people claimed to have it. It sort of makes sense. Don't we all want to see ourselves as enlightened people who help children fulfill their potential? A noted educator told me that it had become politically incorrect for educators to even talk about, and maybe even think about, having a fixed mindset in any area. And a principal told me that he was recently giving some mild suggestions to a teacher when she looked at him indignantly and said, "Are you implying I have a fixed mindset?" Although for simplicity I've talked as though some people have a growth mindset and some people have a fixed mindset. In truth, we're all a mixture of the two. There's no point denying it. Sometimes we're in one mindset and sometimes we're in the other. Our task then becomes to understand what triggers our fixed mindset. What are the events or situations that take us to a place where we feel our, or other people's, abilities are fixed? What are the events or situations that take us to a place of judgment rather than to a place of development? What happens when our fixed mindset persona shows up? The character within who warns us to avoid challenges and beats us up when we fail at something? How does that persona make us feel? What does it make us think, and how does it make us act? How do those thoughts, feelings, and actions affect us and those around us? And, most important, what can we do over time to keep that persona from interfering with our growth and that of our children? How can we persuade that fixed mindset persona to get on board with the goals that spring from our growth mindset? I'll address these questions in the final chapter as we examine the process of personal change. What I will emphasize here is that it is a long journey, one that takes commitment and persistence. But once we acknowledge that we all have recurrent fixed mindsets, we can talk to one another openly. We can talk about our fixed mindset personas, when they show up, how they affect us, and how we're learning to deal with them. And as we do, we will realize that we have lots of fellow travelers on our journey. How do you pass a growth mindset on? You would think that once adults adopted more of a growth mindset, they would automatically pass it on to kids. It would simply ooze out in their words and deeds. That's what we thought. But it's not what we're finding. Many adults are not passing on their growth mindsets. How is that possible? First, let's look at the findings. In a number of studies, researchers looked at the mindsets of parents and their children. In each case, many parents held a growth mindset, but they were not necessarily passing it on to their children. In other studies, researchers looked at the mindsets of teachers and their students. In each case, many teachers held a growth mindset, but they were not necessarily passing it on to their students. Something else was going on. Of course, it's possible that some of these parents or teachers had false growth mindsets. But beyond that, we're finding something fascinating. Adults' mindsets are in their heads and are not directly visible to children. Adults' overt actions speak far louder, and this is what children are picking up on. Unfortunately, these actions often don't line up with the growth mindsets in adults' heads. So what are the actions that convey the different mindsets? First, no surprise, it's the praise. Parents' praise molds their children's mindsets. It's interesting that this doesn't necessarily line up with the parents' mindsets. Even parents who hold a growth mindset can find themselves praising their child's ability and neglecting to focus on their child's learning process. It can be hard to shake the idea that telling kids they're smart will build their confidence. Second, it's the way adults respond to children's mistakes or failures. When a child has a setback and the parent reacts with anxiety or with concern about the child's ability, this fosters more of a fixed mindset in the child. The parent may try to gloss over the child's failure, but the very act of doing so may convey that the failure is an issue. So, although parents may hold a growth mindset, they may still display worry about their child's confidence or morale when the child stumbles. It's the parents who respond to their children's setbacks with interest and treat them as opportunities for learning, who are transmitting a growth mindset to their children. These parents think setbacks are good things that should be embraced, and that setbacks should be used as a platform for learning. They address the setback head-on and talk to their children about the next steps for learning. In other words, every single day parents are teaching their children whether mistakes, obstacles, and setbacks are bad things or good things. The parents who treat them as good things are more likely to pass on a growth mindset to their children. Third, passing on a growth mindset is about whether teachers are teaching for understanding or are simply asking students to memorize facts, rules, and procedures. Research is showing that when teachers care about deeper understanding and work with students to achieve it, then students are more likely to believe that their abilities can be developed. One study found that when math teachers taught for conceptual understanding, gave feedback that deepened students' understanding, and then allowed students to revise their work, to experience and show their deeper understanding, their students moved toward a growth mindset in math. These students believed they could develop their basic mathematical ability. On the other hand, when teachers thought of math as just a set of rules and procedures to memorize, they could emphasize the importance of effort or persistence, but students could not feel their abilities growing and did not tend to move toward a growth mindset. By the way, many of these teachers used the words growth mindset in their classrooms, but their teaching methods. Their actions did not foster that growth mindset in their students. Other studies paint a similar picture. In one study, high school students talked about their math teachers. Some of them said that when they were stuck, their teacher sat down with them and said things like this: "Show me what you've done, let's try to understand how you're thinking, and then let's figure out what you should try next." The students who were treated like this though understanding was of paramount importance and could be achieved with support from the teacher, were moving toward a growth mindset in math. Yet in this era of high-stakes testing, much teaching emphasizes memorization of facts, rules, and procedures to ensure that students do well on the all-important tests. As we have seen, this may promote more fixed mindsets and perhaps, ironically, undermine students' performance on these very tests. There is nothing like deep learning to ensure good outcomes. Sadly, in this atmosphere many students are coming to equate learning with memorizing. I am hearing from many researchers and educators that students across the economic spectrum are becoming increasingly unable to grasp the difference between memorizing facts, rules, and procedures and truly understanding the concepts underlying the material. Aside from the bad news for growth mindsets, this also has disturbing implications for our nation. Great contributions to society are born of curiosity and deep understanding. If students no longer recognize and value deep learning, where will the great contributions of the future come from? We were initially surprised to find that many adults with growth mindsets were not passing them on. However, the moral of this story is that parents, teachers, and coaches pass on a growth mindset not by having a belief sitting in their heads but by embodying a growth mindset in their deeds, the way they praise, conveying the processes that lead to learning, the way they treat setbacks as opportunities for learning, and the way they focus on deepening understanding as the goal of learning. Our legacy. As parents, teachers, and coaches, we are entrusted with people's lives. They are our responsibility and our legacy. We now know that the growth mindset has a key role to play in helping us fulfill our mission and in helping them fulfill their potential. Grow your mindset. Every word in action from parent to child sends a message. Tomorrow, listen to what you say to your kids and tune into the messages you're sending. Are they messages that say, "You have permanent traits and I'm judging them"? Or are they messages that say, "You're a developing person and I'm interested in your development"? How do you use praise? Remember that praising children's intelligence or talent, tempting as it is, sends a fixed mindset message. It makes their confidence and motivation more fragile. Instead, try to focus on the processes they used there. Strategies, effort, or choices. Practice working the process praise into your interactions with your children. Watch and listen to yourself carefully when your child messes up. Remember that constructive criticism is feedback that helps the child understand how to fix something. It's not feedback that labels or simply excuses the child. At the end of each day, write down the constructive criticism and the process praise you've given your kids. Parents often set goals their children can work toward. Remember that having innate talent is not a goal. Expanding skills and knowledge is. Pay careful attention to the goals you set for your children. If you're a teacher, remember that lowering standards doesn't raise students' self-esteem. But neither does raising standards without giving students ways of reaching them. The growth mindset gives you a way to set high standards and have students reach them. Try presenting topics in a growth framework and giving students process feedback. I think you'll like what happens. Do you think of your slower students as kids who will never be able to learn well? Do they think of themselves as permanently dumb? Instead, try to figure out what they don't understand and what learning strategies they don't have. Remember that great teachers believe in the growth of talent and intellect, and are fascinated by the process of learning. Are you a fixed mindset coach? Do you think first and foremost about your record and your Reputation? Are you intolerant of mistakes? Do you try to motivate your players through judgment? That may be what's holding up your athletes. Try on the growth mindset. Instead of asking for mistake-free games, ask for full commitment and full effort. Instead of judging the players, give them the respect and the coaching. Chapter 8. Changing Mindsets. The growth mindset is based on the belief in change, and the most gratifying part of my work is watching people change. Nothing is better than seeing people find their way to things they value. This chapter is about kids and adults who found their way to using their abilities, and about how all of us can do that. The nature of change. I was in the middle of first grade when my family moved. Suddenly I was in a new school. Everything was unfamiliar: the teacher, the students, and the work. The work was what terrified me. The new class was way ahead of my old one, or at least it seemed that way to me. They were writing letters I hadn't learned to write yet. And there was a way to do everything that everyone seemed to know except me. So when the teacher said, "Class, put your name on your paper in the right place," I had no idea what she meant. So I cried. Each day things came up that I didn't know how to do. Each time, I felt lost and overwhelmed. Why didn't I just say to the teacher, "Mrs. Kahn, I haven't learned this yet. Could you show me how?" Another time when I was little, my parents gave me money to go to the movies with an adult in a group of kids. As I rounded the corner to the meeting place, I looked down the block and saw them all leaving. But instead of running after them and yelling, "Wait for me," I stood frozen, clutching the coins in my hand and watching them recede into the distance. Why didn't I try to stop them or catch up with them? Why did I accept defeat before I had tried some simple tactics? I know that in my dreams I had often performed magical or superhuman feats in the face of danger. I even have a picture of myself in my self-made Superman cape. Why, in real life, couldn't I do an ordinary thing like ask for help or call out for people to wait? In my work, I see lots of young children like this: bright, seemingly resourceful children who are paralyzed by setbacks. In some of our studies, they just have to take the simplest action to make things better. But they don't. These are the young children with the fixed mindset. When things go wrong, they feel powerless and incapable. Even now, when something goes wrong or when something promising seems to be slipping away, I still have a passing feeling of powerlessness. Does that mean I haven't changed? No, it means that change isn't like surgery. Even when you change, the old beliefs aren't just removed like a worn-out hip or knee and replaced with better ones. Instead, the new beliefs take their place alongside the old ones, and as they become stronger, they give you a different way to think, feel, and act. Beliefs are the key to happiness, and to misery. In the 1960s, psychiatrist Aaron Beck was working with his clients when he suddenly realized it was their beliefs that were causing their problems. Just before they felt a wave of anxiety or depression, something quickly flashed through their minds. It could be, "Dr. Beck thinks I'm incompetent." Or, "This therapy will never work. I'll never feel better." These kinds of beliefs caused their negative feelings not only in the therapy session, but in their lives, too. They weren't beliefs people were usually conscious of. Yet Beck found he could teach people to pay attention and hear them. And then he discovered he could teach them how to work with and change these beliefs. This is how cognitive therapy was born, one of the most effective therapies ever developed. Whether they're aware of it or not, all people keep a running account of what's happening to them, what it means, and what they should do. In other words, our minds are constantly monitoring and interpreting. That's just how we stay on track. But sometimes the interpretation process goes awry. Some people put more extreme interpretations on things that happen and then react with exaggerated feelings of anxiety, depression, or anger, or superiority. Mindsets go further. Mindsets frame the running account that's taking place in people's heads. They guide the whole interpretation process. The fixed mindset creates an internal monologue that is focused on judging. This means I'm a loser. This means I'm a better person than they are. This means I'm a bad husband. This means my partner is selfish. In several studies, we probed the way people with a fixed mindset dealt with information they were receiving. We found that they put a very strong evaluation on each and every piece of information. Something good led to a very strong positive label, and something bad led to a very strong negative label. People with a growth mindset are also constantly monitoring what's going on, but their internal monologue is not about judging themselves and others in this way. Certainly they're sensitive to positive and negative information, but they're attuned to its implications for learning and constructive action. What can I learn from this? How can I improve? How can I help my partner do this better? Now, cognitive therapy basically teaches people to rein in their extreme judgments and make them more reasonable. For example, suppose Alana does poorly on a test and draws the conclusion, I'm stupid. Cognitive therapy would teach her to look more closely at the facts by asking, what is the evidence for and against your conclusion? Alana may, after prodding, come up with a long list of ways in which she has been competent in the past, and may then confess, I guess I'm not as incompetent as I thought. She may also be encouraged to think of reasons she did poorly on the test other than stupidity, and these may further temper her negative judgment. Alana is then taught how to do this for herself, so that when she judges herself negatively in the future, she can refute the judgment and feel better. In this way, cognitive therapy helps people make more realistic and optimistic judgments. But it does not take them out of the fixed mindset in its world of judgment. It does not confront the basic assumption, the idea that traits are fixed, that is causing them to constantly measure themselves. In other words, it does not escort them out of the framework of judgment and into the framework of growth. This chapter is about changing the internal monologue from a judging one to a growth-oriented one. The Mindset Lectures. Just learning about the growth mindset can cause a big shift in the way people think about themselves and their lives. So each year in my undergraduate course, I teach about these mindsets, not only because they are part of the topic of the course, but also because I know what pressure these students are under. Every year, students describe to me how these ideas have changed them in all areas of their lives. Here is Maggie, the aspiring writer. I recognized that when it comes to artistic or creative endeavors, I had internalized a fixed mindset. I believed that people were inherently artistic or creative and that you could not improve through effort. This directly affected my life because I have always wanted to be a writer, but have been afraid to pursue any writing classes or to share my creative writing with others. This is directly related to my mindset because any negative criticism would mean that I am not a writer inherently. I was too scared to expose myself to the possibility that I might not be a natural. Now, after listening to your lectures, I have decided to register for a creative writing class next term. And I feel that I have really come to understand what was preventing me from pursuing an interest that has long been my secret dream. I really feel this information has empowered me. Maggie's internal monologue used to say, don't do it. Don't take a writing class. Don't share your writing with others. It's not worth the risk. Your dream could be destroyed. Protect it. Now it says, go for it. Make it happen. Develop your skills. Pursue your dream. And here's Jason, the athlete. As a student athlete at Columbia, I had exclusively the fixed mindset. Winning was everything and learning did not enter the picture. However, after listening to your lectures, I realized that this is not a good mindset. I've been working on learning while I compete, under the realization that if I can continually improve, even in matches, I will become a much better athlete. Jason's internal monologue used to be, win. Win. You have to win. Prove yourself. Everything depends on it. Now it's, observe. Learn. Improve. Become a better athlete. And finally, here's Tony, the recovering genius. In high school I was able to get top grades with minimal studying and sleeping. I came to believe that it would always be so because I was naturally gifted with a superior understanding and memory. However, after about a year of sleep deprivation, my understanding and memory began to not be so superior anymore. When my natural talents, which I had come to depend on almost entirely for my self-esteem, as opposed to my ability to focus, my determination, or my ability to work hard, came into question, I went through a personal crisis that lasted until a few weeks ago when you discussed the different mindsets in class. Understanding that a lot of my problems were the result of my preoccupation with proving myself to be smart and avoiding failures has really helped me get out of the self-destructive pattern I was living in. Tony's internal monologue went from, I'm naturally gifted. I don't need to study. I don't need to sleep. I'm superior. To, oh, I'm losing it. I can't understand things, I can't remember things. What am I now? To, don't worry so much about being smart. Don't worry so much about avoiding failures. That becomes self-destructive. Let's start to study and sleep and get on with life. Of course, these people will have setbacks and disappointments. And sticking to the growth mindset may not always be easy. But just knowing it gave them another way to be. Instead of being held captive by some intimidating fantasy about the great writer, the great athlete, or the great genius, the growth mindset gave them courage to embrace their own goals and dreams. And more important, it gave them a way to work toward making them real. A mindset workshop. Adolescence, as we've seen, is a time when hordes of kids turn off to school. You can almost hear the stampede as they try to get as far from learning as possible. This is a time when students are facing some of the biggest challenges of their young lives, and a time when they are heavily evaluating themselves, often with a fixed mindset. It is precisely the kids with the fixed mindset who panic and run for cover, showing plummeting motivation and grades. Over the past few years, we've developed a workshop for these students. It teaches them the growth mindset and how to apply it to their schoolwork. Here is part of what they're told. Many people think of the brain as a mystery. They don't know much about intelligence and how it works. When they do think about what intelligence is, many people believe that a person is born either smart, average, or dumb and stays that way for life. But new research shows that the brain is more like a muscle. It changes and gets stronger when you use it. And scientists have been able to show just how the brain grows and gets stronger when you learn. We then describe how the brain forms new connections and grows when people practice and learn new things. When you learn new things, these tiny connections in the brain actually multiply and get stronger. The more that you challenge your mind to learn, the more your brain cells grow. Then, things that you once found very hard or even impossible, like speaking a foreign language or doing algebra, seem to become easy. The result is a stronger, smarter brain. We go on to point out that nobody laughs at babies and says how dumb they are because they can't talk. They just haven't learned yet. We show students pictures of how the density of brain connections changes during the first years of life as babies pay attention, study their world, and learn how to do things. Over a series of sessions, through activities and discussions, students are taught study skills and shown how to apply the lessons of the growth mindset to their studying and their schoolwork. Students love learning about the brain, and the discussions are very lively. But even more rewarding are the comments students make about themselves. Let's revisit Jimmy, the hardcore turned-off student from Chapter 3. In our very first workshop, we were amazed to hear him say with tears in his eyes, "You mean I don't have to be dumb?" You may think these students are turned off, but I saw that they never stop caring. Nobody gets used to feeling dumb. Our workshop told Jimmy, "You're in charge of your mind. You can help it grow by using it in the right way." And as the workshop progressed, here is what Jimmy's teacher said about him. Jimmy, who never puts in any extra effort and often doesn't turn in homework on time, actually stayed up late working for hours to finish an assignment early, so I could review it and give him a chance to revise it. He earned a B+ on the assignment. He had been getting C's and lower. Incidentally, teachers weren't just trying to be nice to us by telling us what we wanted to hear. The teachers didn't know who was in our growth mindset workshop. This was because we had another workshop too. This workshop met just as many times, and taught them even more study skills. And students got just as much personal attention from supportive tutors. But they didn't learn the growth mindset and how to apply it. Teachers didn't know which of their students went to which of the workshops, but they still singled out Jimmy and many of the students in the growth mindset workshop to tell us that they'd seen real changes in their motivation to learn and improve. Lately I have noticed that some students have a greater appreciation for improvement. R was performing below standards. He has learned to appreciate the improvement from his grades of 52, 46, and 49 to his grades of 67 and 71. He valued his growth in learning mathematics. M was far below grade level. During the past several weeks, she has voluntarily asked for extra help from me during her lunch period in order to improve her test taking performance. Her grades drastically improved from failing to an 84 on the most recent exam. Positive changes in motivation and behavior are noticeable in K and J. They have begun to work hard on a consistent basis. Several students have voluntarily participated in peer tutoring sessions during their lunch periods or after school. Students such as N and S were passing when they requested the extra help and were motivated by the prospect of sheer improvement. We were eager to see whether the workshop affected students' grades, so, with their permission, we looked at students' final marks at the end of the semester. We looked especially at their math grades, since these reflected real learning of challenging new concepts. Before the workshops, students' math grades had been suffering badly. But afterward, lo and behold, students who'd been in the growth mindset workshop showed a jump in their grades. They were now clearly doing better than the students who'd been in the other workshop. The growth mindset workshop, just 8 sessions long, had a real impact. This one adjustment of students' beliefs seemed to unleash their brain power and inspire them to work and achieve. Of course, they were in a school where the teachers were responsive to their outpouring of motivation, and were willing to put in the extra work to help them learn. Even so, these findings show the power of changing mindsets. The students in the other workshop did not improve. Despite their 8 sessions of training in study skills and other good things, they showed no gains. Because they were not taught to think differently about their minds, they were not motivated to put the skills into practice. The mindset workshop put students in charge of their brains. Freed from the vice of the fixed mindset, Jimmy, and others like him could now use their minds more freely and fully. Brainology. The problem with the workshop was that it required a big staff to deliver it. This wouldn't be feasible on a large scale. Plus, the teachers weren't directly involved. They could be a big factor in helping to sustain the students' gains. So we decided to put our workshop on interactive computer modules and have teachers guide their classes through the modules. With the advice of educational experts, media experts, and brain experts, we developed the Brainology trademark program. It presents animated figures, Chris and Dahlia, 7th graders who are cool, but are having problems with their schoolwork. Dahlia is having trouble with Spanish, and Chris with math. They visit the lab of Dr. Sir Bruss, a slightly mad brain scientist, who teaches them all about the brain and the care and feeding of it. He teaches them what to do for maximum performance from the brain, like sleeping enough, eating the right things, and using good study strategies, and he teaches them how the brain grows as they learn. The program, all along, shows students how Chris and Dahlia apply these lessons to their schoolwork. The interactive portions allow students to do brain experiments, see videos of real students with their problems and study strategies, recommend study plans for Chris and Dahlia, and keep a journal of their own problems and study plans. Here are some of the 7th graders writing about how this program changed them. After Brainology, I now have a new look at things. Now, my attitude towards the subjects I have trouble in is I try harder to study and master the skills. I have been using my time more wisely, studying every day and reviewing the notes that I took on that day. I am really glad that I joined this program because it increased my intelligence about the brain. I did change my mind about how the brain works and I do things differently. I will try harder because I know that the more you try the more your brain works. All I can say is that Brainology changed my grades. Bon voyage. The Brainology program kind of made me change the way I work and study and practice for school work now that I know how my brain works and what happens when I learn. Thank you for making us study more and helping us build up our brain. I actually picture my neurons growing bigger as they make more connections. Teachers told us how formerly turned off students were now talking the Brainology talk. For example, they were taught that when they studied well and learned something, they transferred it from temporary storage, working memory, to more permanent storage, long-term memory. Now they were saying to each other, I'll have to put that into my long-term memory. Sorry, that stuff is not in my long-term memory. I guess I was only using my working memory. Teachers said that students were also offering to practice, study, take notes, or pay attention more to make sure that neural connections would be made. As one student said, yes, the Brainology program helped a lot. Every time I thought about not doing work, I remembered that my neurons could grow if I did do the work. The teachers also changed. Not only did they say great things about how their students benefited, they also said great things about the insights they themselves had gained. In particular, they said Brainology was essential for understanding that all students can learn, even the ones who struggle with math and with self-control. That I have to be more patient because learning takes a great deal of time and practice. How the brain works, each learner learns differently. Brainology assisted me in teaching for various learning styles. Our workshop went to children in 20 schools. Some children admitted to being skeptical at first. I used to think it was just free time and a good cartoon, but I started listening to it and I started doing what they told me to do. In the end, almost all children reported meaningful benefits. More about change. Is change easy or hard? So far it sounds easy. Simply learning about the growth mindset can sometimes mobilize people for meeting challenges and persevering. The other day one of my former grad students told me a story. But first some background. In my field, when you submit a research paper for publication, that paper often represents years of work. Some months later you receive your reviews, 10 or so pages of criticism single-spaced. If the editor still thinks the paper has potential, you will be invited to revise it and resubmit it, provided you can address every criticism. My student reminded me of the time she had sent her thesis research to the top journal in our field. When the reviews came back, she was devastated. She had been judged the work was flawed and, by extension, so was she. Time passed, but she couldn't bring herself to go near the reviews again or work on the paper. Then I told her to change her mindset. Look, I said, it's not about you. That's their job. Their job is to find every possible flaw. Your job is to learn from the critique and make your paper even better. Within hours she was revising her paper, which was warmly accepted. She tells me, I never felt judged again. Never. Every time I get that critique, I tell myself, oh, that's their job. And I get to work immediately on my job. But change is also hard. When people hold on to a fixed mindset, it's often for a reason. At some point in their lives it served a good purpose for them. It told them who they were or who they wanted to be, a smart, talented child, and it told them how to be that, perform well. In this way, it provided a formula for self-esteem and a path to love and respect from others. The idea that they are worthy and will be loved is crucial for children, and if a child is unsure about being valued or loved, the fixed mindset appears to offer a simple, straightforward route to this. Psychologists Karen Horney and Carl Rogers working in the mid-1900s, both proposed theories of children's emotional development. They believed that when young children feel insecure about being accepted by their parents, they experience great anxiety. They feel lost and alone in a complicated world. Since they're only a few years old, they can't simply reject their parents and say, "I think I'll go it alone." They have to find a way to feel safe and to win their parents over. Both Horney and Rogers proposed that children do this by creating or imagining other selves, ones that their parents might like better. These new selves are what they think the parents are looking for and what may win them the parents' acceptance. Often, these steps are good adjustments to the family situation at the time, bringing the child some security and hope. The problem is that this new self, this all-competent, strong, good self that they now try to be, is likely to be a fixed mindset self. Over time, the fixed traits may come to be the person's sense of who they are, and validating these traits may come to be the main source of their self-esteem. Mindset change asks people to give this up. As you can imagine, it's not easy to just let go of something that has felt like yourself for many years and that has given you your root to self-esteem. And it's especially not easy to replace it with a mindset that tells you to embrace all the things that have felt threatening: challenge, struggle, criticism, setbacks. When I was exchanging my fixed mindset for a growth one, I was acutely aware of how unsettled I felt. For example, I've told you how as a fixed mindsetter, I kept track each day of all my successes. At the end of a good day, I could look at the results, the high numbers on my intelligence counter, my personality counter, and so on, and feel good about myself. But as I adopted a growth mindset and stopped keeping track, some nights I would still check my mental counters and find them at zero. It made me insecure not to be able to tote up my victories. Even worse, since I was taking more risks, I might look back over the day and see all the mistakes and setbacks and feel miserable. What's more, it's not as though the fixed mindset wants to leave gracefully. If the fixed mindset has been controlling your internal monologue, it can say some pretty strong things to you when it sees those counters at zero. You're nothing. It can make you want to rush right out and rack up some high numbers. The fixed mindset once offered you refuge from that very feeling, and it offers it to you again. Don't take it. Then there's the concern that you won't be yourself anymore. It may feel as though the fixed mindset gave you your ambition, your edge, your individuality. Maybe you fear you'll become a bland cog in the wheel just like everyone else. Ordinary. But opening yourself up to growth makes you more yourself, not less. The growth-oriented scientists, artists, athletes, and CEOs we've looked at were far from humanoids going through the motions. They were people in the full flower of their individuality and potency. Opening yourself up to growth. The rest of the book is pretty much about you. First are some mindset exercises in which I ask you to venture with me into a series of dilemmas. In each case, you'll first see the fixed mindset reactions, and then work through to a growth mindset solution. The first dilemma. Imagine you've applied to graduate school. You applied to just one place because it was the school you had your heart set on. And you were confident you'd be accepted since many people considered your work in your field to be original and exciting. But you were rejected. The fixed mindset reaction. At first you tell yourself that it was extremely competitive, so it doesn't really reflect on you. They probably had more first-rate applicants than they could accept. Then the voice in your head starts in. It tells you that you're fooling yourself, rationalizing. It tells you that the admissions committee found your work mediocre. After a while, you tell yourself it's probably true. The work is probably ordinary, pedestrian, and they'd seen that. They were experts. The verdict is in and you're not worthy. With some effort you talk yourself back into your first reasonable and more flattering conclusion, and you feel better. In the fixed mindset, and in most cognitive therapies, that's the end of it. You've regained your self-esteem, so the job is finished. But in the growth mindset, that's just the first step. All you've done is talk to yourself. Now comes the learning and self-improvement part. The growth mindset step. Think about your goal and think about what you could do to stay on track toward achieving it. What steps could you take to help yourself succeed? What information could you gather? Well, maybe you could apply to more schools next time. Or maybe, in the meantime, you could gather more information about what makes a good application. What are they looking for? What experiences do they value? You could seek out those experiences before the next application. Since this is a true story, I know what step the rejected applicant took. She was given some strong growth mindset advice and, a few days later, she called the school. When she located the relevant person and told him the situation, she said, "I don't want to dispute your decision. I just want to know, if I decide to apply again in the future, how I can improve my application. I would be very grateful if you could give me some feedback along those lines." Nobody scoffs at an honest plea for helpful feedback. Several days later, he called her back and offered her admission. It had indeed been a close call and, after reconsidering her application, the department decided they could take one more person that year. Plus, they liked her initiative. She had reached out for information that would allow her to learn from experience and improve in the future. It turned out in this case that she didn't have to improve her application. She got to plunge right into learning in her new graduate program. Plans that you'll carry out and ones that you won't. The key part of our applicant's reaction was her call to the school to get more information. It wasn't easy. Every day people plan to do difficult things, but they don't do them. They think, "I'll do it tomorrow," and they swear to themselves that they'll follow through the next day. Research by Peter Gallwitzer and his colleagues shows that vowing, even intense vowing, is often useless. The next day comes and the next day goes. What works is making a vivid, concrete plan. Tomorrow during my break, I'll get a cup of tea, close the door to my office, and call the graduate school. Or, in another case, on Wednesday morning, right after I get up and brush my teeth, I'll sit at my desk and start writing my report. Or, tonight, right after the dinner dishes are done, I'll sit down with my wife in the living room and have that discussion. I'll say to her, "Dear, I'd like to talk about something that I think will make us happier." Think of something you need to do, something you want to learn, or a problem you have to confront. What is it? Now make a concrete plan. When will you follow through on your plan? Where will you do it? How will you do it? Think about it in vivid detail. These concrete plans you can visualize about when, where, and how you are going to do something lead to really high levels of follow through, which, of course, ups the chances of success. So the idea is not only to make a growth mindset plan, but also to visualize, in a concrete way, how you are going to carry it out. Feeling bad, but doing good. Let's go back a few paragraphs to when you were rejected by the graduate school. Suppose your attempt to make yourself feel better had failed. You could still have taken the growth mindset step. You can feel miserable and still reach out for information that will help you improve. Sometimes after I have a setback, I go through the process of talking to myself about what it means and how I plan to deal with it. Everything seems fine until I sleep on it. In my sleep, I have dream after dream of loss, failure, or rejection, depending on what happened. Once when I'd experienced a loss, I went to sleep and had the following dreams: my hair fell out, my teeth fell out, I had a baby and it died, and so on. Another time when I felt rejected. My dreams generated countless rejection experiences, real and imagined. In each instance, the incident triggered a theme, and my too active imagination gathered up all the variations on the theme to place before me. When I woke up, I felt as though I'd been through the wars. It would be nice if this didn't happen, but it's irrelevant. It might be easier to mobilize for action if I felt better, but it doesn't matter. The plan is the plan. Remember the depressed students with the growth mindset? The worse they felt, the more they did the constructive thing. The less they felt like it, the more they made themselves do it. The critical thing is to make a concrete, growth-oriented plan. And to stick to it. The number one draft choice. The last dilemma seemed hard, but, basically, it was solved by a phone call. Now imagine you're a promising quarterback. In fact, you're the winner of the Heisman Trophy, college football's highest award. You're the top draft pick of the Philadelphia Eagles, the team you've always dreamed of playing for. So what's the dilemma? The second dilemma. The pressure is overwhelming. You yearn for playing time in the games, but every time they put you in a game to try you out, you turn anxious and lose your focus. You were always cool under pressure, but this is the pros. Now all you see are giant guys coming toward you, 1,200 pounds of giant guys who want to take you apart. Giant guys who move faster than you ever thought possible. You feel cornered, helpless. The fixed mindset reaction. You torture yourself with the idea that a quarterback is a leader and you're no leader. How could you ever inspire the confidence of your teammates when you can't get your act together to throw a good pass or scramble for a few yards? To make things worse, the sportscasters keep asking, "What happened to the boy wonder?" To minimize the humiliation, you begin to keep to yourself, and to avoid the sportscasters, you disappear into the locker room right after the game. Whoa. Is this a recipe for success? What steps could you take to make things better? Think about the resources at your disposal and how you could use them. But first, get your mindset turned around. The growth mindset step. In the growth mindset, you tell yourself that the switch to the professionals is a huge step, one that takes a lot of adjustment and a lot of learning. There are many things you couldn't possibly know yet and that you'd better start finding out about. You try to spend more time with the veteran quarterbacks, asking them questions and watching tapes with them. Instead of hiding your insecurities, you talk about how different it is from college. They, in turn, tell you that's exactly how they felt. In fact, they share their humiliating stories with you. You ask them what they did to overcome the initial difficulties, and they teach you their mental and physical techniques. As you begin to feel more integrated into the team, you realize you're part of an organization that wants to help you grow, not judge and belittle you. Rather than worrying that they overpaid for your talent, you begin to give them their money's worth of incredibly hard work and team spirit. People who don't want to change. Entitlement. The world owes you. Many people with the fixed mindset think the world needs to change, not them. They feel entitled to something better, a better job, house, or spouse. The world should recognize their special qualities and treat them accordingly. Let's move to the next dilemma and imagine yourself in this situation. The next dilemma. Here I am, you think, in this low-level job. It's demeaning. With my talent, I shouldn't have to work like this. I should be up there with the big boys, enjoying the good life. Your boss thinks you have a bad attitude. When she needs someone to take on more responsibilities, she doesn't turn to you. When it's time to give out promotions, she doesn't include you. The fixed mindset reaction. She's threatened by me, you say bitterly. Your fixed mindset is telling you that, because of who you are, you should automatically be thrust into the upper levels of the business. In your mind, people should see your talents and reward you. When they don't, it's not fair. Why should you change? You just want your due. But putting yourself in a growth mindset, what are some new ways you could think and some steps you could take? For example, what are some new ways you could think about effort? About learning? And how could you act on this new thinking in your work? Well, you could consider working harder and being more helpful to people at work. You could use your time to learn more about the business you're in instead of bell-yawking about your low status. Let's see how this might look. The growth mindset step. But first, let's be clear. For a long time, it's frightening to think of giving up the idea of being superior. An ordinary, run-of-the-mill human being isn't what you want to be. How could you feel good about yourself if you are no more valuable than the people you look down on? You begin to consider the idea that some people stand out because of their commitment and effort. Little by little you try putting more effort into things and seeing if you get more of the rewards you wanted. You do. Although you can slowly accept the idea that effort might be necessary, you still can't accept that it's no guarantee. It's enough of an indignity to have to work at things, but to work and still not have them turn out the way you want now. That's really not fair. That means you could work hard and somebody else could still get the promotion. Outrageous. It's a long time before you begin to enjoy putting in effort in a long time before you begin to think in terms of learning. Instead of seeing your time at the bottom of the corporate ladder as an insult, you slowly see that you can learn a lot at the bottom that could help you greatly on your rise to the top. Learning the nuts and bolts of the company could later give you a big advantage. All of our top growth mindset CEOs knew their companies from top to bottom, inside out, and upside down. Instead of seeing your discussions with your colleagues as time spent getting what you want, you begin to grasp the idea of building relationships or even helping your colleagues develop in ways they value. This can become a new source of satisfaction. You might say you were following in the footsteps of Bill Murray and his Groundhog Day experience. As you become a more growth-minded person, you're amazed at how people start to help you, support you. They no longer seem like adversaries out to deny you what you deserve. They're more and more often collaborators toward a common goal. It's interesting, you started out wanting to change other people's behavior and you did. In the end, many people with the fixed mindset understand that their cloak of specialness was really a suit of armor they built to feel safe, strong, and worthy. While it may have protected them early on, later it constricted their growth, sent them into self-defeating battles, and cut them off from satisfying, mutual relationships. Denial. My life is perfect. People in a fixed mindset often run away from their problems. If their life is flawed, then they're flawed. It's easier to make believe everything's alright. Try this dilemma. The dilemma. You seem to have everything. You have a fulfilling career, a loving marriage, wonderful children, and devoted friends. But one of those things isn't true. Unbeknownst to you, your marriage is ending. It's not that there haven't been signs, but you chose to misinterpret them. You were fulfilling your idea of the man's role or the woman's role, and couldn't hear your partner's desire for more communication and more sharing of your lives. By the time you wake up and take notice, it's too late. Your spouse has disengaged emotionally from the relationship. The fixed mindset reaction. You've always felt sorry for divorced people, abandoned people. And now you're one of them. You lose all sense of worth. Your partner, who knew you intimately, doesn't want you anymore. For months, you don't feel like going on, convinced that even your children would be better off without you. It takes you a while to get to the point where you feel at all useful or competent or hopeful. Now comes the hard part because, even though you now feel a little better about yourself, you're still in the fixed mindset. You're embarking on a lifetime of judging. With everything good that happens, your internal voice says, maybe I'm okay after all. But with everything bad that happens, the voice says, my spouse was right. Every new person you meet is judged too as a potential betrayer. How could you rethink your marriage, yourself, and your life? From a growth mindset perspective? Why were you afraid to listen to your spouse? What could you have done? What should you do now? The growth mindset step. First, it's not that the marriage, which you used to think of as inherently good, suddenly turned out to have been all bad or always bad. It was an evolving thing that had stopped developing for lack of nourishment. You need to think about how both you and your spouse contributed to this, and especially about why you weren't able to hear the request for greater closeness and sharing. As you probe, you realize that, in your fixed mindset, you saw your partner's request as a criticism of you that you didn't want to hear. You also realize that at some level, you were afraid you weren't capable of the intimacy your partner was requesting. So, instead of exploring these issues with your spouse, you turned a deaf ear, hoping they would go away. When a relationship goes sour, these are the issues we all need to explore in depth, not to judge ourselves for what went wrong, but to overcome our fears and learn the communication skills we'll need to build and maintain better relationships in the future. Ultimately, a growth mindset allows people to carry forth not judgments and bitterness, but new understanding and new skills. Is someone in your life trying to tell you something you're refusing to hear? Step into the growth mindset and listen again. Changing your child's mindset. Many of our children, our most precious resource, are stuck in a fixed mindset. You can give them a personal brainology workshop. Let's look at some ways to do this. The precocious fixed mindsetter. Most kids who adopt a fixed mindset don't become truly passionate believers until later in childhood. But some kids take to it much earlier. The dilemma. Imagine your young son comes home from school one day and says to you, "Some kids are smart and some kids are dumb. They have a worse brain." You're appalled. "Who told you that?" you ask him, gearing up to complain to the school. "I figured it out myself," he says proudly. He saw that some children could read and write their letters and add a lot of numbers, and others couldn't. He drew his conclusion, and he held fast to it. Your son is precocious in all aspects of the fixed mindset, and soon the mindset is in full flower. He develops a distaste for effort. He wants his smart brain to churn things out quickly for him. And it often does. When he takes to chess very quickly, your spouse, thinking to inspire him, rents the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, a film about a young chess champion. What your son learns from the film is that you could lose and not be a champion anymore. So he retires. "I'm a chess champion," he announces to one and all. A champion who won't play. Because he now understands what losing means, he takes further steps to avoid it. He starts cheating at Candyland, Chutes and Ladders, and other games. He talks often about all the things he can do and other children can't. When you and your spouse tell him that other children aren't dumb, they just haven't practiced as much as he has, he refuses to believe it. He watches things carefully at school and then comes home and reports, "Even when the teacher shows us something new, I can do it better than them. I don't have to practice." This boy is invested in his brain, not in making it grow but in singing its praises. You've already told him that it's about practice and learning, not smart and dumb, but he doesn't buy it. What else can you do? What are other ways you can get the message across? The growth mindset step. You decide that, rather than trying to talk him out of the fixed mindset, you have to live the growth mindset. At the dinner table each evening, you and your partner structure the discussion around the growth mindset, asking each child, and each other, "What did you learn today? What mistake did you make that taught you something? What did you try hard at today?" You go around the table with each question, excitedly discussing your own and one another's effort, strategies, setbacks, and learning. You talk about skills you have today that you didn't have yesterday because of the practice you put in. You dramatize mistakes you made that held the key to the solution, telling it like a mystery story. You describe with relish things you're struggling with and making progress on. Soon the children can't wait each night to tell their stories. "Oh my goodness," you say with wonder. "You certainly did get smarter today." When your fixed mindset son tells stories about doing things better than other children, everyone says, "Yeah, but what did you learn?" When he talks about how easy everything is for him in school, you all say, "Oh, that's too bad. You're not learning." Can you find something harder to do so you could learn more? When he boasts about being a champ, you say, "Champs are the people who work the hardest." You can become a champ. Tomorrow tell me something you've done to become a champ. Poor kid, it's a conspiracy. In the long run, he doesn't stand a chance. When he does his homework and calls it easy or boring, you teach him to find ways to make it more fun and challenging. If he has to write words, like boy, you ask him, how many words can you think of that rhyme with boy? Write them on separate paper. And later we can try to make a sentence that has all the words. When he finishes his homework, you play that game. The boy threw the toy into the soy sauce. The girl with the swirl curl ate a pearl pearl dot. Eventually, he starts coming up with his own ways to make his homework more challenging. And it's not just school or sports. You encourage the children to talk about ways they learn to make friends, or ways they're learning to understand and help others. You want to communicate that feats of intellect or physical prowess are not all you care about. For a long time, your son remains attracted to the fixed mindset. He loves the idea that he's inherently special, case closed. He doesn't love the idea that he has to work every day for some little gain in skill or knowledge. Stardom shouldn't be so taxing. Yet is. The value system in the family shifts toward the growth mindset. He wants to be a player. So at first he talks the talk, squawking. Then he walks the walk, balking. Finally, going all the way, he becomes the mindset watchdog. When anyone in the family slips into fixed mindset thinking, he delights in catching them. Be careful what you wish for, you joke to your spouse. The fixed mindset is so very tempting. It seems to promise children a lifetime of worth, success, and admiration just for sitting there and being who they are. That's why it can take a lot of work to make the growth mindset flourish where the fixed mindset has taken root. Effort gone awry. Sometimes the problem with a child isn't too little effort. It's too much. And for the wrong cause. We've all heard about school children who stay up past midnight every night studying. Or children who are sent to tutors so they can outstrip their classmates. These children are working hard, but they're typically not in a growth mindset. They're not focused on love of learning. They're usually trying to prove themselves to their parents. And in some cases, the parents may like what comes out of this high effort, the grades, the awards, the admission to top schools. Let's see how you would handle this one. The dilemma. You're proud of your daughter. She's at the top of her class and bringing home straight A's. She's a flute player studying with the best teacher in the country. And you're confident she'll get into the top private high school in the city. But every morning before school, she gets an upset stomach, and some days she throws up. You keep feeding her a blander and blander diet to soothe her sensitive stomach, but it doesn't help. It never occurs to you that she's a nervous wreck. When your daughter is diagnosed with an ulcer, it should be a wake-up call, but you and your spouse remain asleep. You continue to see it as a gastrointestinal issue. The doctor, however, insists that you consult a family counselor. He tells you it's a mandatory part of your daughter's treatment and hands you a card with the counselor's name and number. The fixed mindset reactions. The counselor tells you to ease up on your daughter, let her know it's okay not to work so hard. Make sure she gets more sleep. So you, dutifully following the instructions, make sure she gets to sleep by 10 o'clock each night. But this only makes things worse. She now has less time to accomplish all the things that are expected of her. Despite what the counselor has said, it doesn't occur to you that she could possibly want your daughter to fall behind other students, or be less accomplished at the flute, or risk not getting into the top high school. How could that be good for her? The counselor realizes she has a big job. Her first goal is to get you more fully in touch with the seriousness of the problem. The second goal is to get you to understand your role in the problem. You and your spouse need to see that it's your need for perfection that has led to the problem. Your daughter wouldn't have run herself ragged if she hadn't been afraid of losing your approval. The third goal is to work out a concrete plan that you can all follow. Can you think of some concrete things that can be done to help your daughter enter a growth mindset so she can ease up and get some pleasure from her life? The growth mindset step. The plan the counselor suggests would allow your daughter to start enjoying the things she does. The flute lessons are put on hold. Your daughter is told she can practice as much or as little as she wants for the pure joy of the music and nothing else. She is to study her school materials to learn from them, not to Cram everything possible into her head. The counselor refers her to a tutor who teaches her how to study for understanding. The tutor also discusses the material with her in a way that makes it interesting and enjoyable. Studying now has a new meaning. It isn't about getting the highest grade to prove her intelligence and worth to her parents. It's about learning things and thinking about them in interesting ways. Your daughter's teachers are brought into the loop to support her in her reorientation toward growth. They're asked to talk to her about, and praise her for, her learning process rather than how she did on tests. I can see that you really understand how to use metaphors in your writing. I can see that you were really into your project on the Incas. When I read it, I felt as though I were in ancient Peru. You are taught to talk to her this way too. Finally, the counselor strongly urges that your daughter attend a high school that is less pressured than the one you have your eye on. There are other fine schools that focus more on learning and less on grades and test scores. You take your daughter around and spend time in each of the schools. Then she discusses with you and the counselor which ones she was most excited about and felt most at ease in. Slowly, you learn to separate your needs and desires from hers. You may have needed a daughter who was number one in everything, but your daughter needed something else, acceptance from her parents and freedom to grow. As you let go, your daughter becomes much more genuinely involved in the things she does. She does them for interest in learning, and she does them very well indeed. Is your child trying to tell you something you don't want to hear? You know the ad that asks, do you know where your child is now? If you can't hear what your child is trying to tell you in words or actions, then you don't know where your child is. Enter the growth mindset and listen harder. Mindset and willpower. Sometimes we don't want to change ourselves very much. We just want to be able to drop some pounds and keep them off. Or stop smoking. Or control our anger. Some people think about this in a fixed mindset way. If you're strong and have willpower, you can do it. But if you're weak and don't have willpower, you can't. People who think this way may firmly resolve to do something, but they'll take no special measures to make sure they succeed. These are the people who end up saying, quitting is easy. I've done it 100 times. It's just like the chemistry students we talked about before. The ones with the fixed mindset thought, if I have ability, I'll do well. If I don't, I won't. As a result, they didn't use sophisticated strategies to help themselves. They just studied in an earnest but superficial way and hoped for the best. When people with a fixed mindset fail their test in chemistry, dieting, smoking, or anger, they beat themselves up. They're incompetent, weak, or bad people. Where do you go from there? My friend Nathan's 25th high school reunion was coming up, and when he thought about how his ex-girlfriend would be there, he decided to lose the paunch. He'd been handsome and fit in high school, and he didn't want to show up as a fat middle-aged man. Nathan had always made fun of women and their diets. What's the big fuss? You just need some self-control to lose the weight. He decided he would just eat part of what was on his plate. But each time he got into a meal, the food on the plate disappeared. I blew it, he'd say, feeling like a failure and ordering dessert, either to seal the failure or to lift his mood. I'd say, Nathan, this isn't working. You need a better system. Why not put some of the meal aside at the beginning or have the restaurant wrap it up to take home? Why not fill your plate with extra vegetables, so it'll look like more food? There are lots of things you can do. To this he would say, no, I have to be strong. Nathan ended up going on one of those liquid crash diets, losing weight for the reunion, and putting back more than he lost. Afterward, I wasn't sure how this was being strong, and how using some simple strategies was being weak. Next time you try to diet, think of Nathan and remember that willpower is not just a thing you have or don't have. Willpower needs help. I'll come back to this point. Anger. Controlling anger is something else that's a problem for many people. Something triggers their temper and off they go, losing control of their mouths or worse. Here, too, people may vow that next time they'll be different. Anger control is a big issue between partners and between parents and children, not only because partners and children do things that make us angry, but also because we may think we have a greater right to let loose when they do. Try this one. The dilemma. Imagine you're a nice, caring person as you probably are usually. You love your spouse and feel lucky to have them as your partner. But when they violate one of your rules, like letting the garbage overflow before taking it out, you feel personally betrayed and start criticizing. It begins with "I've told you 1,000 times," then moves on to "you never do anything right." When they still don't seem properly ashamed, you flare, insulting their intelligence. Maybe you aren't smart enough to remember garbage, and their character. If you weren't so irresponsible, you wouldn't, if you cared about anyone but yourself, you'd. Seething with rage, you then bring in everything you can think of to support your case. My father never trusted you, either, or your boss was right when he said you were limited. Your spouse has to leave the premises to get out of range of your mounting fury. The fixed mindset reaction. You feel righteous about your anger for a while, but then you realize you've gone too far. You suddenly recall all the ways that your spouse is a supportive partner and feel intensely guilty. Then you talk yourself back into the idea that you, too, are a good person, who's just slipped up, lost it temporarily. I've really learned my lesson, you think. I'll never do this again. But believing you can simply keep that good person in the forefront in the future, you don't think of strategies you could use next time to prevent a flare-up. That's why the next time is a carbon copy of the time before. The growth mindset and self-control. Some people think about losing weight or controlling their anger in a growth mindset way. They realize that to succeed, they'll need to learn and practice strategies that work for them. It's like the growth mindset chemistry students. They used better study techniques, carefully planned their study time, and kept up their motivation. In other words, they used every strategy possible to make sure they succeeded. Just like them, people in a growth mindset don't merely make New Year's resolutions and wait to see if they stick to them. They understand that to diet, they need to plan. They may need to keep desserts out of the house, or think in advance about what to order in restaurants, or schedule a once-a-week splurge, or consider exercising more. They think actively about maintenance. What habits must they develop to continue the gains they've achieved? Then there are the setbacks. They know that setbacks will happen. So instead of beating themselves up, they ask, what can I learn from this? What will I do next time when I'm in this situation? It's a learning process, not a battle between the bad you and the good you. In that last episode, what could you have done with your anger? First, think about why you got so worked up. You may have felt devalued and disrespected when your spouse shirked the tasks or broke your rules, as though they were saying to you, you're not important. Your needs are trivial. I can't be bothered. Your first reaction was to angrily remind them of their duty. But on the heels of that was your retaliation, sort of okay big shot, if you think you're so important, try this on for size. Your spouse, rather than reassuring you of your importance, simply braced for the onslaught. Meanwhile, you took the silence as evidence that they felt superior, and it fueled your escalation. What can be done? Several things. First, spouses can't read your mind, so when an anger-provoking situation arises, you have to matter-of-factly tell them how it makes you feel. I'm not sure why, but when you do that, it makes me feel unimportant. Like, you can't be bothered to do things that matter to me. They, in turn, can reassure you that they care about how you feel and will try to be more watchful. Are you kidding? You say. My spouse would never do that. Well, you can request it directly. As I've sometimes done, please tell me that you care how I feel. And you'll try to be more watchful. When you feel yourself losing it, you can learn to leave the room and write down your ugliest thoughts, followed by what is probably really happening. She doesn't understand this is important to me. He doesn't know what to do when I start to blow. When you feel calm enough, you can return to the situation. You can also learn to loosen up on some of your rules, now that each one is not a test of your partner's respect for you. With time, you might even gain a sense of humor about them. For example, if your spouse leaves some socks in the living room or puts the wrong things in the recycling bins, you might point at the offending items and ask sternly, "What is the meaning of this?" You might even have a good laugh. When people drop the good, bad, strong, weak thinking that grows out of the fixed mindset, they're better able to learn useful strategies that help with self-control. Every lapse doesn't spell doom. It's like anything else in the growth mindset. It's a reminder that you're an unfinished human being and a clue to how to do it better next time. Maintaining change. Whether people change their mindset in order to further their career, heal from a loss, help their children thrive, lose weight, or control their anger, change needs to be maintained. It's amazing. Once a problem improves, people often stop doing what caused it to improve. Once you feel better, you stop taking your medicine. But change doesn't work that way. When you've lost weight, the issue doesn't go away. Or when your child starts to love learning, the problem isn't solved forever. Or when you and your partner start communicating better, that's not the end of it. These changes have to be supported or they can go away faster than they appeared. Maybe that's why Alcoholics Anonymous tells people they will always be alcoholics so they won't become complacent and stop doing what they need to do to stay sober. It's a way of saying, you'll always be vulnerable. This is why mindset change is not about picking up a few tricks. In fact, if someone stays inside a fixed mindset and uses the growth strategies, it can backfire. Wes, a dad with a fixed mindset, was at his wits' end. He'd come home exhausted from work every evening and his son, Mickey, would refuse to cooperate. Wes wanted quiet, but Mickey was noisy. Wes would warn him, but Mickey would continue what he was doing. Wes found him stubborn, unruly, and not respectful of Wes's rights as a father. The whole scene would disintegrate into a shouting match and Mickey would end up being punished. Finally, feeling he had nothing to lose, Wes tried some of the growth-oriented strategies. He showed respect for Mickey's efforts and praised his strategies when he was empathic or helpful. The turnaround in Mickey's behavior was dramatic. But as soon as the turnaround took place, Wes stopped using the strategies. He had what he wanted and he expected it to just continue. When it didn't, he became even angrier and more punitive than before. Mickey had shown he could behave and now refused to. The same thing often happens with fixed mindset couples who start communicating better. Marlene and Scott were what my husband and I call the bicker sons. All they did was bicker. Why don't you ever pick up after yourself? I might if you weren't such a nag. I wouldn't have to nag if you did what you were supposed to do. Who made you the judge of what I'm supposed to do? With counseling, Marlene and Scott stopped jumping on the negatives. More and more, they started rewarding the thoughtful things their partner did and the efforts their partner made. The love and tenderness they thought were dead returned. But once it returned, they reverted. In the fixed mindset, things shouldn't need such effort. Good people should just act good and good relationships should just unfold in a good way. When the bickering resumed, it was fiercer than ever because it reflected all of their disappointed hopes. Mindset change is not about picking up a few pointers here and there. It's about seeing things in a new way. When people, couples, coaches and athletes, managers and workers, parents and children, teachers and students change to a growth mindset, they change from a judge and be judged framework to a learn and help learn framework. Their commitment is to growth, and growth takes plenty of time, effort, and mutual support to achieve and maintain. The journey to a true growth mindset. In Chapter 7, I talked about the false growth mindset. If you remember, my colleague Susan Mackey was encountering people who claimed to have a growth mindset but who, upon closer inspection, did not. Once alerted, I started seeing false growth mindset everywhere and I understood why it was happening. Everyone wants to seem enlightened, in the know. Maybe as a parent, educator, coach, or business professional, having a growth mindset was expected or admired. Or maybe it was my fault. Did I make the change to a growth mindset seem too easy, so that people didn't realize that a journey was required? Or maybe people didn't know how to take the journey. So let's talk more about that journey. The journey, step 1. You will be surprised to hear me say this. The first step is to embrace your fixed mindset. Let's face it, we all have some of it. We're all a mixture of growth and fixed mindsets, and we need to acknowledge that. It's not a shameful admission. It's more like, welcome to the human race. But even though we have to accept that some fixed mindset dwells within, we do not have to accept how often it shows up and how much havoc it can wreak when it does. The journey, step 2. The second step is to become aware of your fixed mindset triggers. When does your fixed mindset persona come home to roost? It could be when you're thinking about taking on a big, new challenge. Your fixed mindset persona might appear and whisper, maybe you don't have what it takes, and everyone will find out. It could be when you're struggling with something and you keep hitting dead ends. Your fixed mindset persona might fly in and offer its advice, give it up. It's just making you feel frustrated and ashamed. Do something easier. How about when you feel like you've failed decisively? Lost your job. Lost a cherished relationship. Messed up in a very big way. It's a rare person who doesn't have a fixed mindset episode. And we all know very well what that fixed mindset says to us. You're not the person you thought you were, and you never will be. What about when you encounter someone who's a lot better than you in the very area you pride yourself on? What does that fixed mindset voice say to you? Does it tell you that you'll never be as good? Does it make you hate that person just a little? What about our fixed mindset toward others? If we're educators, what happens after a high-stakes test? Do we judge who's smart and who isn't? If we're managers, what happens during and after a big project? Do we judge our employees' talent? If we're parents, do we pressure our kids to prove they're smarter than others and make them feel judged based on their grades and test scores? Think about it. What's a recent time you were triggered into a fixed mindset? What happened to summon your fixed mindset persona? What did it whisper in your ear, and how did it make you feel? When I asked people to tell me when their fixed mindset persona usually shows up, here's what they said. When I'm under pressure, my fixed mindset persona appears. He fills my head with noise and keeps me from paying attention to the work I have to do. Then I feel like I can't accomplish anything. Feelings of anxiety and sadness also attract him. He attempts to weaken me when I'm already feeling down. He makes comments like, you don't have the ability to grasp difficult concepts. You have reached your limit. By the way, this was a woman who thought of her fixed mindset persona as a male. Whenever I demonstrate my laziness through procrastination, whenever I have a disagreement with someone, whenever I'm too shy to talk to anyone at a party, my fixed mindset persona shows up. He tells me, your failure doesn't define you. Of course, he yells the word failure, and whispers the rest. Whenever I fail to live up to the image that my fixed mindset persona concocted for me, she makes me feel stressed, defensive, and unmotivated. She doesn't allow me to take risks that may affect our reputation as a successful person. She doesn't let me speak out for fear of being wrong. She forces me to look like a person who can understand and do everything effortlessly. When we have a work deadline and my team is under the gun, my fixed mindset persona sits in judgment. Instead of empowering my team, I become a harping perfectionist. No one is doing it right. No one is working fast enough. Where are all those breakthrough ideas? We'll never make it. As a result, I often just take over and do a lot of the work myself. Needless to say, it doesn't do wonders for team morale. We will hear more from this team leader and one of his team members in a moment. As you come to understand your triggers and get to know your persona, don't judge it. Just observe it. The journey. Step 3. Now give your fixed mindset persona a name. You heard me correctly. I watched as Susan Mackey worked with financial executives who had given their fixed mindset personas names. They were talking about what triggers their personas, and the top guy said, "When we're in a crunch, Dwayne shows up. He makes me super critical of everyone, and I get bossy and demanding rather than supportive." A female team member quickly responded, "Yes. And when your Dwayne shows up, my INE comes roaring out. INE is the macho guy who makes me feel incompetent. So your Dwayne brings out my INE and I become cowering and anxious, which infuriates Dwayne." And on went this amazing conversation. These sophisticated professionals talked about when their named persona showed up, how it made them feel and act, and how it affected others around them. By the way, once they were able to understand each other's triggers and personas, they could move their interactions to another level, and the morale in this unit went up by leaps and bounds. Every fall I teach a freshman seminar, 16 brand new Stanford students, very eager and very nervous. Each week I give them a different assignment for a short paper. Find something important about yourself that you'd like to change and take the first step. Do something outrageously growth mindset in the service of what you'd like to change. Project yourself 25 years into the future and write me a letter about where you are in your life and all the struggles, disappointments, hardships, and failures you've encountered along the way. This year I tried a new one. In the past, I had assigned a paper that asked students to reflect on their mindsets, and I'd always had a few of them laying claim to a long-standing and total growth mindset. But this year I asked them to identify their fixed mindset triggers and to give their fixed mindset persona a name. It was fascinating. Not one student claimed to have no triggers or persona. All of them were able to write eloquently, and painfully, about their fixed mindset persona, its triggers, and its impact. Meet Gertrude, my KG, histrionic, self-aggrandizing, fixed mindset persona. She sneaks into my subconscious and undermines me. The name Gertrude means strong spear, which reflects her insistence on unwavering, natural strength. She detests hard work, second place, and imperfections. Any whiff of failure or imperfection can trigger Gertrude's entrance. 3 seconds slower in a swim race. No shot at the varsity team. Didn't draw as good a self-portrait as another girl in my class. Art isn't your thing. Couldn't use as many big words as my older sister. You'll never be as smart as her. Gertrude convinces me that failure is definitive. One mistake can take away my future success. Almost like marriage, I know sugar daddy will be with me through thick and thin, sickness and health, and life and death. He comes forth when I step out of my comfort zone, get criticized, or experience a failure, causing me to become defensive, lash out at others, or stagnate. Sugar daddy finds peace in never leaving his comfort zone, but his views conflict more and more with mine as his rigid guidelines try to keep me boxed in his standstill world. Failure, especially public failure, is my main fixed mindset trigger. That's when Henrietta comes out. She is my critical grandmother, and in the fixed mindset I remind myself more of her than I'd care to admit. My Henrietta persona is quick to blame others to preserve her ego. She rejects failure instead of embracing it, and makes me worry that if anyone ever sees me fail they will deem me a failure. My fixed mindset persona is Z, the mirror image of my first initial. SZ shows up when I least require her, like after a failed attempt, a rejection, or a missed opportunity. I've always been an avid writer, the editor of my high school newsletter and the author of a now published novel. So when the chance to be a part of the Stanford Daily, the school newspaper, arrived, I was thrilled to apply. I worked very hard on the essays for the application and felt they were well written. Thus, when I awoke to the thundering knocks at 7 a.m. on a Friday morning and I heard the screaming of Stanford Daily, my heart skipped a happy beat. As my roommate opened the door, the reps from the newspaper yelled out, "Welcome to the Stanford Daily." To her. As this happened, Z was screaming too, but it was stupid, stupid, stupid. How could you think you're capable of getting into the daily? Z was especially ferocious since my roommate spent exactly half an hour on her essays and even asked me for ideas for them. P.S. For a later assignment to do something outrageously growth mindset, S actually contacted the Stanford Daily to see if they needed any new writers. They did and she got the job. I am still thrilled by her courage in the face of the painful rejection. Anything that triggers self-doubt triggers my fixed mindset, which triggers more self-doubt. I've decided to name my doubt guy Dale Denton, Seth Rogen's character in Pineapple Express, picturing my fixed mindset as a lazy, bumbling slob of a guy sitting in the corner of my brain helps me battle against him. Dale produces a constant stream of doubt-provoking statements. Whispers of what if you can never repeat that success, trail behind every successful outcome. And when an endeavor veers in the wrong direction, Dale is always present to help the doubt blossom. Take a moment to think carefully about your own fixed mindset persona. Will you name it after someone in your life? A character from a book or a movie? Will you give it your middle name? It's part of you but not the main part of you? Or perhaps you might give it a name you don't like, to remind you that that's not the person you want to be. The journey, step 4. You're in touch with your triggers and you're excruciatingly aware of your fixed mindset persona and what it does to you. It has a name. What happens now? Educate it. Take it on the journey with you. The more you become aware of your fixed mindset triggers, the more you can be on the lookout for the arrival of your persona. If you're on the verge of stepping out of your comfort zone, be ready to greet it when it shows up and warns you to stop. Thank it for its input, but then tell it why you want to take this step and ask it to come along with you. Look, I know this may not work out, but I'd really like to take a stab at it. Can I count on you to bear with me? When you hit a setback, the chances are excellent it's going to show up again. Don't suppress it or ban it. Just let it do its thing. Let it do its song and dance, and when it settles down a bit, talk to it about how you plan to learn from the setback and go forward. Yes, it's possible that I'm not so good at this yet, but I think I have an idea of what to do next. Let's just try it. When you're under pressure and you're afraid your team will let you down, tell them that Dwayne is in full bloom and ask them what they need from you to do their best work. Try to understand and respect where they are and what they're thinking, and try to support and guide them. Keep talking to Dwayne so he can calm down and then help you cut them some slack and contribute to team process. Remember that your fixed mindset persona was born to protect you and keep you safe. But it has developed some very limiting ways of doing that. So educate it in the new growth mindset ways that it can support you in taking on challenges and sticking to them, bouncing back from failure, and helping and supporting others to grow. Understand the persona's point of view, but slowly teach it a different way of thinking, and take it with you on your journey to a growth mindset. Understanding that everyone has a fixed mindset persona can give us more compassion for people. It allows us to understand their struggles. I mentioned in a previous chapter how upset I was to learn that some educators were scolding children for acting in fixed mindset ways. They would point to the mindset chart in the front of the room and tell the kids to shape up. Compare this to the following teacher. Over a period of time, this teacher had her grade school class talk about their fixed mindset triggers and then give their personas a name. One boy wouldn't do it, which was very much in line with a lot of his behavior. There were many things he wouldn't do no matter how much the teacher gently encouraged him. For weeks he sat there, mute, while every other student in the class talked about and drew pictures of their little fixed mindset personas: scared Sally, lazy Larry, anxious Andy, or helpless Hannah. But the teacher let him know that she was there for him whenever he was ready, and one day, out of nowhere, he said, "Dumping Dan." "What?" the teacher asked. "Dumping Dan," he repeated. "Whenever I do something, I do it wrong. I can't do anything right. That's why everyone dumps on me. Whenever he tried to do his schoolwork, it seemed that Dumping Dan would yell at him so loudly that he couldn't proceed. The teacher rushed to his side and worked with him and Dumping Dan so that eventually Dan relented, gave him some peace, and allowed him to work. After that, his growth was tremendous. How many students or employees are considered incompetent, stubborn, or defiant when they just don't know how to function well under the current conditions? How often do we threaten, punish, or write off these people rather than helping them work it through or helping them find the conditions under which they can thrive? Every one of us has a journey to take. It starts by accepting that we all have both mindsets. Then we learn to recognize what triggers our fixed mindset. Failures, criticism, deadlines, disagreements, and we come to understand what happens to us when our fixed mindset persona is triggered. Who is this persona? What's its name? What does it make us think, feel, and do? How does it affect those around us? Importantly, we can gradually learn to remain in a growth mindset place despite the triggers, as we educate our persona and invite it to join us on our growth mindset journey. Ideally, we will learn more and more about how we can help others on their journey to learn and help learn. Let's say you've named and tamed your fixed mindset persona. That's great, but please don't think your journey is complete. For your growth mindset to bear fruit, you need to keep setting goals. Goals for growth. Every day presents you with ways to grow and to help the people you care about grow. How can you remember to look for these chances? First, make a copy of this graphic summary of the two mindsets, which was created by the wonderful Nigel Holmes, and tape it to your mirror. Each morning, use it to remind yourself of the differences between the fixed and growth mindsets. Then, as you contemplate the day in front of you, try to ask yourself these questions. If you have room on your mirror, copy them over and tape them there, too. Diagram by Nigel Holmes. What are the opportunities for learning and growth today? For myself? For the people around me? As you think of opportunities, form a plan, and ask, when, where, and how will I embark on my plan? When, where, and how make the plan concrete? How asks you to think of all the ways to bring your plan to life and make it work. As you encounter the inevitable obstacles and setbacks, form a new plan and ask yourself the question again. When, where, and how will I act on my new plan? Regardless of how bad you may feel, chat with your fixed mindset persona and then do it. And when you succeed, don't forget to ask yourself, what do I have to do to maintain and continue the growth? Remember, as Alex Rodriguez, the baseball player, wisely said, you either go one way or the other. You might as well be the one deciding the direction. The road ahead. Change can be tough, but I've never heard anyone say it wasn't worth it. Maybe they're just rationalizing, the way people who've gone through a painful initiation say it was worth it. But people who've changed can tell you how their lives have been enhanced. They can tell you about things they have now that they wouldn't have had, and ways they feel now that they wouldn't have felt. Did changing toward a growth mindset solve all my problems? No. But I know that I have a different life because of it, a richer one. And that I'm a more alive, courageous, and open person because of it. It's for you to decide whether change is right for you now. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.